Coming in at number 5, we have Ararat Asylum in Ararat, Victoria, Australia. Ararat Asylum opened its doors in 1865. It was originally named Ararat Lunatic Asylum. It was opened along with 2 sister asylums at Kew and Beechworth to accommodate the growing number of lunatics in the colony of Victoria. The asylum was built as a town within a town, with its own market, gardens, orchard, vineyards, piggery, and other stock kept on the ground. As nice as that sounds, those kept there were called inmates rather than patients, and their treatment was not kind. Many people were sent to the asylum for different reasons, mostly those struggling with mental health and others dumped there for petty reasons. It was home to many men, women, and also children. Both electric shock therapy and the lobotomy were performed en masse at Ararat. Death was another factor that contributed to the dark history that cloaks Ararat. It is estimated that at least 13,000 deaths occurred throughout Ararat's many buildings during its 130 years of operation, meaning that up to a third of patients who entered the hospitals never came out. It is considered Australia's most haunted building to this day. There is currently only one tour operator allowed to go into the building. People who have visited the building have a lot of similar stories about various hauntings. Many experience a bitter taste in their mouth while visiting one of the offices. When this was looked into, it is revealed that one of the head doctors poisoned himself in that very room. Others felt a weird tingling in one side or all over their body while in the electric shock therapy room. Some see faces or shadows, others hear screams or banging. There is not much to be known about the people who died within the walls or who might remain, making it a very dangerous haunted location to any visitor. Coming in at number 4, we have the Bangara Fort, India. The ruins of a fort city built in the 17th century. Bangara Fort consists of fort walls, bazaars, havelis, royal palaces, and numerous temples, with 3 grand stories you can explore. But do not be fooled by the beauty of these ruins, as they are ranked as the most haunted fort in India. The place is considered to be so haunted, entry is restricted after sunset, so if you're wanting to explore, you will have to do it in the safety of the sunlight. It is known that there is a curse that hangs over the fort, put there by Singhir, someone who is well versed in black magic. He fell in love with the Princess Ratnavati, known far and wide for her beauty and kindness. Knowing he did not stand a chance with her, he enchanted her perfume so that when she used it, she would fall deeply in love with him. The princess found out about this and threw the bottle. As it flew through the air, it turned into a boulder and crushed Singhir. He was crushed under its weight, but before he died, he cursed the princess, her family, and the entire village. The next year, a battle was fought between the forces of Bangara and Ajabgar, which led to the death of Ratnavati and most of the army. This was believed to be a result of the curse. It was due to this curse that no one in the village or fort could be reborn. It is forever condemned to desolation and is inhabited by ghosts. If any villager tries to build a roof, it apparently mysteriously collapses. The curse is said to have trapped the souls of those lost within the desolate fort. The guards keep watch to ensure no one enters after dark. It is not a safe place to be when the spirits awake at night. Coming in at number 3, Castle of Good Hope in South Africa. This oldest colonial building in South Africa, the Castle of Good Hope, is a pentagonal fortress built by Dutch colonialists in the 17th century. The well-known landmark is central to the history of Cape Town, having served as the seat of government and military operations for 2 centuries. The first ghost was spotted in 1915 when the apparition of a tall gentleman was seen jumping off the side of one of the castle walls and then walking between the bastions Leerdam and Orange. The other famous ghost who walked the grounds was the Lady in Grey. It is not known exactly who she is, but she would be seen hysterically crying into her hands and running around the castle. She used to be seen frequently by those on the grounds. However, during one of those renovations of the castle, the remains of a woman were uncovered and removed. Since these were removed, the woman has not been seen. It seems she was waiting for her remains to be found. Maybe her death was a sinister attack covered up and her body was lost until that day. The castle today has 3 museums and often tours of the old buildings. Be careful if you visit though, as it appears the spirits who have existed there were not happy ones. Coming in at number 2, Hellfire Club in Ireland. The Hellfire Club was a hunting lodge built in 1925 for William Connolly, an Irish parliamentary speaker. The stones of the buildings are from ancient passage tombs said to have angered the devil, which first associated the site with the supernatural. The lodge reportedly became a gathering place for a small group of Dublin elites who met for debauchery and devil worship. Its ruins sit atop the summit of Montpellier Hill in the foothills of the Dublin Mountains. Most who stumble upon the Hellfire Club today will assume it is nothing more than an old derelict building, but it has a long past full of horrific tales. Tales of animal sacrifice, black masses, cloven-hoofed men, and murder are linked to the structure. The most popular tales tells of a visit by a satanic creature, in the form of a man who was only discovered when one of the players dropped a card and on picking it up noticed the guest had cloven feet. On his discovery, the creature disappeared in a ball of flames. One well-known ghost at the club is that of a young lady. It is said that she crossed paths with the club during one of their dark meetings. She was then thrown into a barrel, set on fire and rolled down the hill for fun. Her spirit stayed, possibly to warn others not to enter and meet the same fate. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have Paveglia Island in Italy. Paveglia is a small island located between Venice and Lido in the Venetian Lagoon, northern Italy. A small canal divides the island into 2 separate parts. The island first appeared in the historical record in 421. In the 14th century, Venetians infected by the bubonic plague were sent here to die, and when they died, they were burned on giant pyres. The site was also used as a mental asylum during the 1800s, where patients were experimented on and tortured. If you ask any of the locals, they will all agree that the island is cursed with unhealthy spirits. Voices and screams can often be heard, and visitors see dark figures. Many visitors say they begin to feel an oppressive, evil feeling as soon as they step on the island. Currently, the island is abandoned. No one steps foot on it for any reason. Even if you did want to visit, you would struggle to find anyone willing to take you. The locals know the island to be evil and refuse to get anywhere close to it. Fishermen even avoid fishing in the area surrounding the island out of fear of accidentally finding and disturbing human remains. It's probably for the best that you don't visit this haunted location unless you're really determined, but that never ends well in horror movies.
Number 5. Union Graveyard. This specific cemetery is located near Stepney Road in Easton, Connecticut, and dates back to the 1700s. According to ghost hunters, it is one of the most haunted cemeteries in the entire United States. The most popular ghostie is the elusive White Lady, popularized partially thanks to Ed Warren having an obsession with her and possibly catching footage of her. Some believe she is Harriet Seeley, whose young son passed shortly after being born, and Harriet herself passing soon after. Legend believes she may have died in hopes of finding her son and still wanders their final resting place searching him out. Others believe she is the ghost of a woman from the 1940s who killed her husband and later herself and is doomed to wander the graveyard. Her physical description is the one thing that remains consistent. She is a young woman wearing a white dress with dark hair. It seems as if she enjoys scaring the daylights out of the living, so my kind of gal. Many who have witnessed her believe they have almost hit her with their vehicle, only to find no trace of her once they pull over. Others claim they have often seen her hovering slightly above the ground around the cemetery, going back and forth amongst different gravestones. In 1993, local firefighter Glenn Powell received a call about a transformer explosion and drove to the scene of the incident with a police officer and observed a female driver following closely behind him on the road. He remembers the night sky had turned pink, and the explosion emitted large amounts of electricity that made the hair on his arms stand up at quite the distance. Glenn was driving along the road beside the cemetery when the officer seated next to him yelled, "Watch out!" In the middle of the road was a woman with long brown flowing hair and wearing a white Victorian nightgown. Glenn described seeing a surprised look on her face before slamming on the brake, but was unable to avoid hitting her, describing it like hitting a brick wall, with the back of his truck flying into the air and the policeman next to him being launched into the dashboard. The driver behind him jumped out of the car and helped the 2 men search the area of the crash to check on the woman, but she was gone. Glenn is quoted as saying there was no sign of bodily fluids, there was no clothing, there was nobody, there was nothing. Now, Lorraine Warren used to often take walks through the cemetery, saying that it was one of the most haunted places around. Ed caught the White Lady on camera on September 1st of 1990 at 2:40 a.m., which was his 7th night in a row of filming at the cemetery. Determined to have proof, and described dark figures surrounding her, shapes that he thought were wood ghosts that seemed to jump on her while they all argued. Now, the Warrens have also referenced a red eyes ghost, so a pair of red eyes which they claimed can be seen in the forest behind the cemetery, not to be confused with bike reflectors that locals have placed within the grounds to scare teens. The famous duo claims the eyes belonged to Earl Kellogg, a man who was set on fire across the street in 1935. Number 4. Highgate Cemetery. Highgate Cemetery is located in North London, England, and was assigned by architect Stephen Geary. There are approximately 170,000 people buried in around 53,000 graves across the West and East cemeteries for context, and today's tale has to do with vampires. In 1967, 2 teenage girls were walking home along the nearby Swains Lane and claimed to have witnessed the dead rising from their graves by the cemetery's north gate. Another teenager had been awoken one night with something cold and clinging on her hand, which left prominent marks the next morning, while reports circulated of a tall man in a hat walking in the area before melting through the cemetery's walls. On Halloween night of 1968, a group of teenagers interested in the occult visited Tottenham Park Cemetery at a time when it was being regularly vandalized by intruders. According to a report in the London Evening News on November 2nd, the teens arranged flowers taken from graves in circular patterns with arrows of blooms pointing to a new grave, which was uncovered. And by that I mean a coffin was opened and the body inside was disturbed. But their most macabre act was driving an iron stake in the form of a cross through the lid and into the chest of the corpse. In a letter to the Hampstead and Highgate Express on February 6 of 1970, David Farrant wrote that when passing Highgate Cemetery on Christmas Eve of 1969, he had glimpsed a grey figure, which he considered to be supernatural, and asked if others had seen anything similar. Sean Manchester claimed David's grey figure was a vampire, and the media quickly latched on, embellishing the tale with stories of the vampire being a king of the vampires or practicing black magic. See, king of the vampires? That's my kind of guy. A rivalry grew between David and Sean, with each claiming that he could and would expel or destroy the specter. Sean declared that he would hold an exorcism on Friday the 13th of March, which, you know, it's a good spooky date for that sort of thing. ITV conducted interviews with both men, and others who claimed to have seen supernatural figures in the cemetery, which were transmitted early on the evening of the 13th, and within 2 hours, a mob of hunters from all over London and beyond had swarmed over the gates and walls into the locked cemetery, despite police efforts to get them the heck out of there. Some months later, on August 1st of 1970, the charred and headless remains of a woman's body were found not far from the catacomb, believed to have been used in a black magic ritual. David was found by police in the churchyard beside the cemetery one night in August, carrying a crucifix and a wooden stake. He was arrested, but when the case came to court, it was dismissed. There was more publicity about David and Sean when rumors spread that they would meet in a magician's duel on Parliament Hill on Friday the 13th of April in 1973, which never occurred. The vampire is said to lurk until this day, so maybe I'll have to make a trip eventually to pay my respects, if you get what I mean. Number 3. Hollywood Forever. The Hollywood Forever Cemetery is one of the oldest in the state of California and is located on Santa Monica Boulevard. Many famous individuals are buried in the cemetery, such as Rudolph Valentino, Mickey Rooney, Anton Yelchin, and Judy Garland. First used in 1899, it features well over 50 acres of land for families and visitors. There are still thousands of spaces available and new mausoleums being completed, but it's time to talk about the ghosties. It should also be noted that Paramount Studios is located near the cemetery, and it is said to be one of the most haunted movie studios of all time. So let me know if y'all want me to ever elaborate on that. I'll start with the obvious, and I think the most dedicated fan ever, the Woman in Black. Also, yes, my bias for unknown ghostly ladies, known only by their outfits, is coming into play. This is why I choose to always dress up, because I'd personally hate for my last outfit to be my raggedy PJs. What do you think? Would this be a good final resting outfit? If not, I'm open to suggestions. Rudolph had passed away at the age of 31 in 1926 after surgery from an ulcer, and over 100,000 people gathered outside the funeral home. Fun fact, there were rumors that a wax replica was used to protect the body at the service. He was quite the popular heartthrob at the time. Heck, I'm racking my brain for like a modern day equivalent, and I'm failing. Just imagine your celebrity crush, but everyone also liked that same crush to a crazy level. It wasn't until after he had been laid to rest that the Woman in Black began to appear, and mainly she likes to come out on the anniversary of his death, dressed from head to toe in black, including a veil. She would leave roses on the grave and was originally thought to be Pola Negri, the woman he was engaged to during the time of his death, but nope. Many women have come forward claiming they are the Woman in Black. However, none of these claims have turned out to be true. Alrighty, ghostie number 2, Miss Virginia Rappy. On Labor Day in 1921, Virginia had attended a party for Mr. Roscoe Arbuckle at the St. Francis Hotel, which was held to celebrate acquiring a very large contract. Sadly, at that very party, Virginia had become sick and mysteriously passed a few days later at only 26 years old. Now, many claims were made surrounding her death, including the possibility of Arbuckle taking sexual advantage of her, a claim that was later proven false but sadly had negatively affected his career. No one knows exactly what happened to her on that fateful Labor Day. Around the site of Virginia's grave, folks have reported the temperature dropping to an icy cold climate, and have also heard what appears to be sobbing. Many believe that she is still dealing with this traumatic event, with many visitors clearly seeing her weeping on the edge of water that is located on the grounds. I'm sure there are plenty of other ghosties, so let me know if anyone knows of any that I might have forgotten. Number 2, Resurrection Cemetery. Located in Chicago, this cemetery is the home of a very well-known ghostie, Resurrection Mary, who is also commonly referred to as Bloody Mary. Blame the interwebs for the spelling out. Has different origins, depending on who's telling the story, but the most shared narratives put her untimely death sometime in the late 1920s to early 1930s, when she was either a victim of a fatal car crash on the way to a night of dancing, or the unfortunate victim of a hit-and-run accident while she was walking home in the rain. Most documented reports of Mary describe her as a young, fashionable blonde woman, no older than mid-20s, wearing a white ball gown, accessories, and a hairstyle to match. The first person who claimed to encounter Resurrection Mary was a man named Jerry Palace. In 1939, Jerry was at a popular dance hall when he was love-struck by a young blonde woman. He approached her, and the two hit it off and spent the night dancing away, even sharing a scandalous kiss. According to Jerry, her hands were as cold as ice, but he had a warm heart that made up for it. So, eventually, closing time came around and Jerry offered the woman a ride home, and she asked to be taken down Archer Avenue. She motioned for Jerry to stop in front of the Resurrection Cemetery, and when he did, she got out and vanished before his eyes. Jerry was shaken with disbelief, but not too frightened to seek out answers. The next morning, he made his way to the address where Mary said she lived, over in Southside. He knocked on the door and encountered her mother. Now, when Jerry asked about the woman he had met the previous night, she informed him that she'd been dead for nearly 3 years. It turned out that, yep, Jerry had encountered Resurrection Mary, and over the next few decades, several other men would have similar experiences. But that was the one that began the legend. One cab driver in the 1970s claimed to see a young woman standing in front of the Resurrection Cemetery one night, and he pulled over to check to see if she needed a ride, and as the woman approached the vehicle, yep, she disappeared. Another encounter with Mary occurred in 1979 when a separate cab driver named Ralph claimed to pick up a young female hitchhiker he believed to be no older than 21. As the two drove up Archer Avenue, she suddenly jumped up and said, "Here, here." The car came to a sudden stop and the woman pointed to a small abandoned shack off of the left side of the road. Now, Ralph questioned whether this was actually where she wanted to go, but before he got an answer, she disappeared without ever opening the door of his cab. His encounter was detailed in a 1979 issue of Suburban Trip magazine, and in 1980, Claire Rudnicki and her husband Mark were driving down Archer Avenue towards the cemetery when they spotted a young woman in a white gown slowly walking down the side of the road. Now, it was immediately obvious that she wasn't an ordinary person, as she was partially transparent with a white aura around her, almost as if she was glowing. Shocked, the couple wondered if they had just seen a ghost, and when they once again reached the spot where Mary was walking, you guessed it, she was gone. Mary is supposedly buried at this cemetery in Justice, Illinois, about a 30-minute drive southwest of Chicago, and it gives her stomping grounds as well as her iconic name. She likes to stick to that particular stretch of road on Archer Avenue, between the cemetery and what was once the O. Henry Ballroom in Willow Springs. Over the years, several researchers have tried to determine the exact identity of Mary, but no one knows. Due to the number of sightings and the credibility of those who claim to see her, Resurrection Mary is said to be one of Chicago's most famous ghosts. Number 1. Stull Cemetery. Stull Cemetery and the abandoned church that rests next to it is located in the tiny, nearly forgotten Kansas town of Stull. Oh, and it's believed to be one of the 7 portals to hell. Though counted among the most haunted cemeteries in the world, Stull Cemetery has gained a haunted reputation due to a legend that involves Satan. The legends say that these stories have been linked to Stull for more than 100 years, but none of them made it into print until the 1970s. Specifically, in November of 1974, an article appeared in the University of Kansas student newspaper that spoke of a number of strange occurrences in the Stull churchyard. According to the article, Stull was haunted by legends of diabolical, supernatural happenings, and the legends claimed that the cemetery was one of the 2 places on Earth where the devil appears in person 2 times each year. Apparently, most students learned of Stull's diabolical reputation from their grandparents, or, other older individuals, but that many of them claimed first-hand encounters with things that could not be explained. One student claimed to have been grabbed by the arm by something unseen, while others spoke of unexplained memory loss when visiting the place. The legends also say that the devil has been appearing here since the 1850s, and insists that the original name of the town was Skull, and that the later corruption into that of Stull was simply to cover the fact that the area was steeped in black magic.
Coming in at number 5, we have Isle of Wight in England. Located off the south coast of England, it's known for its beaches and seafront promenades such as sandy Shanklin Beach and south-facing Ventnor Beach, which is dotted with vintage beach huts. The Isle of Wight is reputed to be one of the spookiest places in the UK and is often referred to by enthusiasts as Ghost Island. Ventnor Botanics Ghostly Gardens is known for its beautiful plants, but also as the most haunted place on the Isle of Wight. Long before it became the tourist attraction it is today, the Ventnor Botanic Gardens used to be the location of the Royal National Hospital, where patients were treated for the deadly killer disease tuberculosis. Over the years, thousands unfortunately died at the hospital until it was finally closed and demolished in 1969. Since the building was demolished and the gardens created, there have been many ghostly sightings. Some guests have seen a woman dressed in a patient gown walking around the gardens, although you can never get close enough to speak with her. Others have encountered a nurse walking up and down the gardens as if she is checking in on patients. There are several remnants of the old hospital still remaining, including a dark Victorian refuse tunnel which leads out from the gardens to the edge of the cliff. The lighthouse at St. Catherine's Point is a spectacular place to watch storms work their way across the English Channel, and on clear nights gives a perfect view of the stars and Milky Way, making it a popular spot for night photography. But But you may find more than just keen photographers on a late night visit. There are many spooky tales surrounding the lighthouse, which is located near the village of Nitton on the south of the Isle of Wight. These range from ghost animal sightings to unexpected footsteps and vanishing items. There was a tragedy that happened at the lighthouse during World War II while 3 watchers were on duty. A bomb was dropped, killing all 3 of the guards. A plaque was placed in their memory, but it is said that they still keep watch at the lighthouse, which is now fully automated. There are several other haunted locations on the Isle, all with their own stories and ghosts. Would you want to make a trip to discover all of them? Coming in at number 4, we have the Paris Catacombs in France. The Paris Catacombs are underground ossuaries in Paris, France. An ossuary is a chest box, building, well, or a site made to serve as the final resting place of human skeletal remains. They are frequently used where burial space is scarce. A body is first buried in a temporary grave, then after some years the skeletal remains are removed and placed in an ossuary. Due to this taking up much less space than a coffin, it means more remains can be stored. Due to this, the Paris Catacombs holds the remains of more than 6 million people. There are plenty of urban legends and ghost stories lurking in the skeletal maze. In the late 18th century, when major public health problems tied to the city's cemeteries led to a decision to transfer their contents to an underground site, the site was consecrated as the Paris Municipal Ossuary on April 7, 1786, and from that time forward took on the mythical name of the Catacombs, in reference to the Roman catacombs, which had fascinated the public since the discovery. Starting in 1809, the catacombs was open to the public by appointment. As you walk through the maze of the catacombs, the walls are paved with human remains. Skulls are propping up other bones as you work your way. While the catacombs span almost 200 miles long, only about a mile of the tunnels is open to the public, and yet that hasn't stopped others from trying to enter the closed-off areas of the catacombs through its many secret entrances hidden around Paris. During the course of the French Revolution, it is said that thousands of remains were dumped unceremoniously in the stone quarries that became the catacombs, so there is no clear record of exactly who and how many people's remains live in the tunnels. There have been many stories from the catacombs. One event even inspired the film As Above So Below from 2014, which I love and I've referenced many times on this channel. There was a group touring the catacombs who came across a video camera that had been left behind. It appeared to have been there a long time. It was covered in dust and was hard to see unless you were looking in depth. To their surprise, the camera had footage still on it. As they watched it, it appeared to show a man lost in the catacombs. They saw as he slowly went mad. Unable to find a way out, the footage stopped abruptly when he dropped to the camera. It is said that the man nor his remains were ever found, and all they had to know that he was ever down there was this footage. They also heard disturbing noises on the footage, screams that did not come from the man recording. They witnessed some things that they could not explain. The legend says that if you are inside of the Paris catacombs after midnight, the walls begin to speak. Disembodied voices will try to persuade you to venture deeper and deeper into the catacombs until you can't find your way out. In at number 3, we have RMS Queen Mary in Long Beach, California. From the time her construction began in 1930 in Clydebank, Scotland, the Queen Mary was destined to stand in a class all on her own. Despite suffering economic setbacks during the Great Depression, which stalled construction on the ship for several years, Cunard Line spared no expense on building the Queen Mary. On May 27, 1936, the Queen Mary departed from Southampton in England, embarking on her maiden voyage. She boasted 5 dining areas and lounges, 2 cocktail bars and swimming pools, a grand ballroom, a squash court, and even a small hospital. The Queen Mary had set a new benchmark in transatlantic travel, which the rich and famous considered as the only civilized way to travel. She quickly seized the hearts and imaginations of the public on both sides of the Atlantic, representing the spirit of an era known for its elegance, class, and style. During its first 3 years at sea, the Queen Mary carried dignitaries and Hollywood celebrities including General Dwight Eisenhower, Elizabeth Taylor, and Audrey Hepburn. However, her days as the luxury liner she was designed to be were short-lived, and in 1939 it was painted a camouflaged grey colour and was stripped of its amenities and began its second life as the Grey Ghost, a World War II troopship. The Queen Mary was the largest and fastest troopship to sail, capable of transporting as many as 16,000 troops at 30 knots. After the end of World War II, the Queen Mary began a 10-month retrofitting process which would return the ship to her original glory. On July 21, 1947, the Queen Mary resumed regular passenger service across the Atlantic Ocean, and continued to do so for nearly 2 more decades. The Queen Mary is now a floating hotel, holding luxury events and putting on shows. However, her days in the war could not be wiped away with her restoration, and it is said another number of spirits live on the ship today. Certain rooms have even been closed to the public due to their paranormal activity. Stateroom B340 has been investigated by many different scare enthusiasts and even featured on Sci-Fi Channel's Ghost Hunters and the British TV series Most Haunted. The first reports of paranormal activity in room B340 date all the way back to 1967, with the guest complaining that someone was knocking on her door during the night, but when she got up to confront them, no one was there. Other complaints include bathroom lights turning on by themselves, the sink faucet turning on and off on its own, and unexplained bathroom doors shutting. Some guests have reported the covers of their bed being pulled off while asleep and waking to see a dark figure standing at the foot of the bed. But who is the figure in room B340? It is said that along with a number of deaths aboard during the war, there was also a murder in one of the rooms. Could this be the victim in room B340? This is not the only ghost on board. Another famous tale is that of a young man who worked on the ship. One night in 1966, the watertight doors in the engine and boiler rooms were ordered to be closed. About 5 minutes later, an 18-year-old crew member was found crushed in the door of hatch 13, trapped with his arms pinned to his side. They pulled him out and rushed him to hospital, but it was already too late. His ghost is regularly seen around the area now, with people reporting the sound of someone running behind them and whistling. Others have noticed that spots of grease that look like fingerprints appeared on their faces. Some have seen a figure of a bearded man in blue overalls that looks just like the man who died out of the corner of their eyes, and several others have said that they saw an engineer wandering the hallways asking if guests had seen his wrench, but when they went back to find him, he had disappeared. Coming in at number 2, we have Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia. This menacing Gothic-style prison opened in Philadelphia in 1829 and became the first in the US to implement solitary confinement, a widely debated practice. It was seen as an experiment on how this practice could be used around the world. Spectators from around the world marveled at its grand architecture. Once built, it was the most expensive construction in the United States at the time. It was a cruel attempt to reform prisoners, the idea being that solitude would lead to penance. Critics, on the other hand, believed it incited emotional anguish comparable to physical torture. They must have found it to be a successful experiment, with the prison replicated in several other states and in Europe. Prisoners were kept in small brick rooms with only one slither of light coming from above. They had no windows or any other type of stimulant while in there. They would receive daily contact from the warden and overseers. If they did have to be moved around the building, a hood was placed over their heads so that they would not have a glimpse of the outside world. They saw this as a system of reform rather than punishment. The warden was legally required to visit every inmate every day, and the overseers were mandated to see each inmate 3 times a day. It is even said that Pep the dog was sentenced to life without parole for killing Governor Gifford Pinchot's wife's cat. Prison records reflect that Pep was assigned an inmate number C2559, which is seen in his mugshot, although some claim he was gifted to the prisoner's therapy dog to help inmates. Gangster Al Capone spent a year imprisoned at Eastern State, where he furnished his cell with luxurious antiques, rugs, and paintings, making it seem like inmates had some control and comfort over their lives. However, the prison's 142-year history is full of death, madness, disease, murder, and torture, making it easy to imagine the spirits of troubled souls left behind to roam its abandoned halls. The harsh punishments used on prisoners are enough to make you shiver even without seeing a ghost. There was the water bath, in which inmates were dunked, then hung out on a wall in winter until ice formed on their skin. The mad chair, which bound an inmate so tightly that circulation was cut off, later necessitating amputations. The iron gag, in which an inmate's hands were tied from the back and strapped to an iron collar in their mouth, so that any movement caused the tongue to tear and bleed profusely. Since the prison closed in 1971, dozens of paranormal researchers visit every year and report that it's a hub of otherworldly activity. Perhaps most convincingly, there are the stories of eerie experiences by visitors, staff, guards, and inmates that have corroborated each other since the 1940s. Cell Block 12 is known for echoing voices and cackling, Cell Block 6 for shadowy figures darting along the walls, Cell Block 4 for visions of ghostly faces. Many people have reported seeing a silhouette of a guard in one of the towers, footsteps, wails, whispers, the same stories over and over again. And lastly, in at number 1, we have the Shanghai Tunnels in Portland, Oregon. Located below Portland, Oregon are a complex maze of tunnels that lead all over the city. These tunnels were created and used for Shanghaiing. Shanghaiing was the practice of stealing able-bodied men and then selling them onto the ship captains for the purpose of work. These men were sold for as little as $50 a head and often spent many years in captivity at sea. These poor men were then forced to work on ships bound for the Orient with no pay. According to legend, as well as some historians, historical data, men were shanghaied in Portland from roughly 1850 to 1941. Things were supposedly at their worst during Prohibition. The Shanghai Tunnels, or Portland Underground, consist of tunnel passages linking Portland's Old Town, Chinatown, to the central downtown area of Portland. The basements of many downtown bars and hotels were linked to the Willamette River waterfront through the tunnels, allowing supplies to be moved from ships docked there directly to basements for storage. Since the mid-19th century, stories have been told about Shanghai practices in Portland. Not only men, but also women were warned to take care against being drugged or kidnapped and hauled off for sale. Women were stolen and sold to men also, but not for shipping labor at the same value as men. The middlemen would wait at the bar for an able-looking man to take the seat next to him. He would attempt to gain his trust, buy him a drink, and then drug him. Once drugged, they would drop the man down the trapdoors located in the bar. Once in the tunnels, they were locked in specially designed prison cells and held captive until they were shipped off as slave laborers. During Prohibition, it is said that the bars moved their operations underground, as well as making it easier than ever for unsuspecting victims to be shanghaied. It is said that around 1,500 people were kidnapped a year through the tunnels, and various stories have been told. The locals often dispute that the tunnels were used for this reason. Others believe in the stories and evidence found in the tunnels. Not only were these people held prisoner in the tunnels until their sale, some even died as a result of the conditions underground. The tunnels are said to be haunted by the aggrieved spirits of the captives who died in the dark recesses beneath the city. Those who have toured the tunnels have heard running in the distance, screams coming from all directions, and sometimes even crying from deep within the tunnels. With such a dark past, it is no surprise the locals deny any of this happening and may have even covered up the details. Coming in at number 5, we have Capuchin Monastery Catacombs, Palermo, Italy. This location is not for the squeamish. The Capuchin Monastery Catacombs is home to thousands of well-dressed corpses, one of the world's most bizarre and morbid tourist attractions. After walking through the monastery, you descend into the catacombs, where you have the chance to share small, enclosed space with thousands of corpses that have been well preserved. Some hanging from the walls, some laying down, and others sat on benches. They believe that having the dead on display like this shows respect to them. Here, nothing stands between the living and the dead, other than a sign asking people to be respectful. The ill-lit, musty catacombs have been separated into a few corridors, each one hosting a specific type of person. There is a room for religious figures, mainly those affiliated with the monastery, for professionals such as doctors, and a room for women. There is a corpse of a person that's said to be so well preserved that she simply looks like she is sleeping. She has been given the name Sleeping Beauty. I don't know about you, but that sounds pretty terrifying. It is believed that the particularly dry atmosphere allowed for the natural mummification of the bodies. Initially, priests would lay the dead on shelves and allow them to drip until they were completely depleted of bodily fluids. A full year later, the dried out corpse would be rinsed with vinegar before being redressed in their best attire and sent to their proper room to stand for eternity. Who knows how many of their spirits still roam the catacombs with no way out? It's not a question I want to find the answer to. In at number 4, we have Black Swan Hotel in York, England. The city of York was built back in 71 AD and was founded between 8000 and 7000 BC. First inhabited by Romans, then Vikings, it has a long history, making it the perfect place for ghosts and spirits to roam. Some have even claimed that it is the most haunted city in the world. Just one of the many haunted locations in York is the Black Swan pub. It was built for William Bowes, a merchant and sheriff of York, in 1417, who also became Lord Mayor in 1428. There are few unusual features and stories surrounding the pub. There is a passageway that was built under the building. It is unclear why this was built, but there have been rumors it once led to the church. It has since been sealed off, but you can still see the stairs leading down under the building and a hallway leading off into the distance. The pub was used as a horse refuge during World War II, and there are even stories of men coming to the pub to auction off their wives during 1884. Through the history of the building, there have been a few spirits who have decided to stick around. One of the regulars is a workman in a bowler hat who regularly fidgets and tuts, as if he is waiting for someone to arrive. He is often seen walking from room to room or waiting at the bar before fading away. No one knows who this spirit is, but it is believed he has been here since 1850, when bowler hats were introduced. Some say he resembles Charlie Chaplin. But he is not the only spirit who inhabits the pub, also frequently seen as a young woman in a long white dress. She stands at the bar in the back room gazing into the fireplace. You can see the grief in the woman's face. She appears to be dealing with some kind of loss. This is just one of the many haunted buildings around York, so travel here at your own risk. In at number 3 we have the Alaskan Hotel in Alaska. Built in 1913 during the gold rush, the Alaskan Hotel is the oldest hotel in the area. The hotel was built to be a luxury experience for those passing by, as they advertised as a pocket version of the finest hostelry on the west coast. The high fashion and glitz were a paltry concealment for the legal prostitution and sale of illicit substances that went on there throughout its history. The hotel overcame many issues that it faced since opening, one being the 1980 imposition of bone-dry prohibition. They turned their bar into a cafe serving soda while also running a speakeasy like most of the previous bars at the time. The Alaskan Hotel was a brothel twice in her history, first legally and second not legal in 1977, which was shut down by the fire marshal. There is one main soul who inhabits the Alaskan Hotel today, and that is a gold miner's wife. She lived at the hotel while waiting for him to return. When he did not return, she began to support herself through prostitution. But then he did return. When he returned to his wife, he was furious with what she had been doing and then murdered her in the hotel. There have since been a number of sightings of her at the hotel. She is said to be very angry and restless. When she is around, the air goes cold, and some have reported hearing footsteps wandering the halls. Some even hear crying coming from the walls, but it is unclear where the noise is coming from. There is also a number of abandoned mines located near the town, so if you're looking for ghosts, this is the place to be. Coming in at number 2 we have City of the Dead, North Ossetia, Russia. Not many people have been to the City of the Dead. It is a dangerous and long journey to reach the village. There are also myths and legends warning that those who do reach the city never return. Reaching this mystifying destination requires a 3-hour drive, taking you down a dangerous and hidden road. It is located in North Ossetia in Russia. If you do manage to reach the city, you will come across many white huts that look like houses. However, they are not. These are actually stone crypts. It is said that in the 18th century a plague hit the city, leaving no one behind. The clans built quarantine houses for the sick. They would bring the food but not the freedom to move about until death claimed their lives. The even sadder side is that people who did not have family to build the hut or bring them food simply went to the large graveyard and simply waited for death. It was a very slow and painful way to go. For those who dare to visit the city, a little well was created outside of each home. If you drop a coin in the well and you hear it hit the stone at the bottom, then the person who died here went to heaven. If you do not hear a noise, then this indicates that the spirit did not pass on and may still be in the village. My advice would be, don't visit this city. We don't need an 18th century disease. And lastly, in at number 1 we have Craigdarroch Castle in Victoria, British Columbia. What first appears to be a beautiful castle is actually a haunted home with a tragic past. The Craigdarroch Castle was built in the 1800s as a home for a wealthy family, coal industrialist Robert Dunsmuir and his wife Joan. It was built over 2,300 meters and comprises 39 rooms. However, Robert died 17 months before the construction was completed. The original architect of the castle, Warren Haywood Williams, also unfortunately died before the finalization of the home. His son James and Alexander decided to finish the castle after their father's death. Robert's death caused a lot of trouble within the family. His sons James and Alex were disappointed that their father's business and assets had been left to their mother. They claimed that they had an oral agreement from their father that they would receive the family business. For the following years they tried countlessly to get the family business from their mother, and after 7 years they finally received the title to the San Francisco Company. Feeling financially stable, Alex finally married his partner of 20 years, Josephine. However, their marriage only lasted 6 weeks as he died on their honeymoon in New York. When he died, the family was torn apart once more over his will. Joan and James fought for years, going to the highest court level. They did not speak during the legal battle, and then finally Joan passed away in 1908 in Craigdarroch Castle in Victoria, where she lived for 18 years. It was believed that James wouldn't attend her funeral, however he did at last. The house has now been taken over by the Craigdarroch Castle Historical Museum Society. There have been many ghost stories presumed to be connected to the Dunsmuir family. One of the main spectres is a woman who walks down the main staircase in a ball gown. No one has seen her in any other part of the castle, and she never goes up the stairs. Could it be the ghost of Joan going to greet her husband? In the basement of the home there have been sightings of a little girl crying, although they disappear if she hears anyone approaching. There have been multiple sightings of her. She is believed to be the youngest daughter of Robert, who died just months after he did. As well as these sightings, there have also been other weird goings on around the castle. Often people hear the crying of a child from various parts of the castle. Objects would also move on their own when no one was around. Some can also hear a piano being played in the dining room when no one is present, but there is no piano in the castle. It seems there are many ghosts of the Dunsmuir family within the castle walls who don't want to leave their home. Coming in at number 5 we have Frankenstein Castle. The Frankenstein Castle is a hilltop castle that sits in Odenwald overlooking the city of Darmstadt. It is thought that this castle was the inspiration for Mary Shelley's Frankenstein novel. The name Frankenstein means stone of the Franks. The name is often used for castles in this region. The castle was built in 1252 by a ruler by the name of Lord Conrad. The castle was enlarged and modernized over the years. During the 18th century, the castle was used as a refuge and hospital ward. Following this, the castle fell into ruins. There are a few myths and legends at the castle. There was a man named Johann Conrad Dippel who reportedly was born in the castle. As he grew up, he became a professional alchemist. As well as this, he became intrigued by anatomy. There are rumors that he started to experiment using human bodies. Even more than this, they said that he attempted to reanimate his experiments using lightning. The people didn't approve of his experiments. The local people still tell stories of Dippel, including Mary Shelley's grandmother. It is thought that this was the basis of a story that is well known today. There are many tales like this from the castle. It seems to have seen a lot of phenomenal things since it was built. There is also the story of Lord George and the dragon. In the 1800s, it is said there was a dangerous dragon that lived in the well. Every night it would crawl from the well and make its way to the local village where it would eat the peasants. They live in fear of the dragon taking more of them. One day a knight named Lord George came through town and they pleaded with him to end the dragon's reign of terror. The next day he put on his armor and rode up to the castle to find the well. He found the dragon and the two fought for hours. They were both ready to pass out from exhaustion when George landed the final blow to the dragon. As he fell, he struck the knight with his tail, which contained poison. The village was so relieved and happy that the dragon was gone, they gave George an honorable burial. To this day you can visit and pay respects to him. It is said that today the ghosts of these tales haunt the castle. Although the castle is in ruins, the stories and spirits still remain. If the Frankenstein story is anything to go by, these are some spirits that you should avoid at all costs. You won't want a reanimated soul coming after you or latching onto your vessel. Coming in at number 4, we have Black Forest. The Black Forest is a large mountain range in southwest Germany. With such an ominous sounding name, it should come as no surprise that the mountain is considered to be haunted. The local folklore tells of ghosts, witches and werewolves. Some even claim that the devil haunts the forest. One of the now most famous stories is that of Der Grobman, who most probably don't know was the origin of Slenderman. The story goes that Der Grobman was a fairy who lived in the Black Forest. The local children were warned if they wandered into the forest they would be taken. For children who did go in the forest despite the warning, the tall man would chase them throughout the forest until he finally caught them. He would often prolong his search to taunt the children. Once he had them in his clutches, he would steal them away. They would never be seen again. His appearance is tall, incredibly thin with multiple upper limbs like that of a spider. It is said he can easily hide behind the trees, making his limbs stretch out like branches of a tree. There are even some woodcuts of the creature reaching back to the 16th to 18th century. There is evidence reaching back even further in time. A journal entry was found of a distraught parent. There is a long history of Der Grobman wreaking havoc on the local community. It is believed that this creature still lives in the Black Forest. The local residents still warn about children wandering off from their family. They try to warn any tourists who would want to camp in the forest or go for a hike overnight. Unless you want to meet the real life Slenderman, I would avoid this on your trip across Germany. Coming in at number 3, we have Elz Castle. Elz Castle is nestled in the hill of Germany. It is still owned by the families who originally built it more than 33 generations ago. Elz Castle is one of the only castles left which has never been destroyed by the events of the medieval era or subsequent wars. The house is split into 3 sections due to the 3 families who built on the land together. The Rubenack and Rodendorf sections of the home are open to the public, but the Kempenich branch of the family uses the other third of the castle. The public can visit to view the treasury. They have gold, silver and other historic artifacts, including an armory with weapons. The castle is a popular tourist attraction and not just for its beauty and history. It is also a hotspot for ghosts. Although the castle has never been destroyed due to war, it has still seen its fair share of battles and tragic events. It is said that if you were to visit the castle in the later hours, you would see the night patrol. Only there isn't any patrol, or at least none dressed in full night gear standing in formation like you might see. It is rumored that the ghosts of past nights still patrol the land. They might have died while standing their ground, refusing to leave their post in their death. They still keep watch over the castle. They have been seen walking around looking for any possible intruders. Coming in at number 2, we have Barbenhausen Barracks. The town of Barbenhausen includes a lot of medieval structures, including a castle from the 12th century. They also have a city wall that was mostly knocked down during war, along with many old homes that were used during World War II. When the last member of the family who built and owned the town died, there was a 35-year conflict over who would have the right to inherit it. The town has seen a lot of battles and conflict for a small town situated close to Frankfurt Frankfurt. It seems the land here was sought after and people were willing to fight to get it. The town still stands today with the remains of its past, a little run down but still standing. It is believed that areas of the town are haunted by the ghosts of World War II soldiers. There have been classic signs of paranormal activity reported by locals and those who happen to pass through the town. Lights in homes turn off and on by themselves, even ones that are unlived in. Others have heard stomping footsteps with no source. It sounds like a great number of soldiers marching all at once, but if you were to investigate, you would see nothing there to create the noise. The most terrifying part of the hauntings are the voices. They have been heard in multiple homes. They often come from the basement like a whisper. When you hear the voices, you are filled with fear, as if the voices are scared of being found out. There is also an individual ghost in the area. A woman's voice has been heard speaking backwards or in some language no one could understand. It has been reported that a witch was burned at the stake in the 19th century, and it's believed she is still there. Some say she seduced and attacked several German soldiers in an attempt to protect her land when they were staying in the town. The town is full of history that might intrigue you to visit, but be warned there are many spirits trapped here and they might not all be so friendly. And finally, in at number 1 we have Cranbury Castle. Cranbury Castle was built in 1170 to fortify the area of Cranbury. The medieval building was acquired by the military and used for intelligence purposes during World War II and the Cold War. It has over time been restored to its original state to preserve its history. During its military use, it gained a lot of negative stories and people viewed it as somewhere to avoid at all cost. After the war, it was turned into a prison camp for war criminals. It's reported that the castle has seen a lot of death. People may have been tortured for information or to find out their involvement in the war. Either way, the energy here was evil. Since this period of time, there have been reports of paranormal events happening frequently. There is even a bunker that was built under the castle to contain the secretive things happening here. This links to other buildings in the area. They use this to smuggle prisoners under the castle. If you were to visit the castle, or if you brave the bunker, if you can find it, you would experience some intense paranormal activities. Screams have been heard from around the castle, screams that are begging for help or for mercy. There have even been ghosts dressed in military uniform walking around the castle late at night. There is a lot of mystery here and secrets that people wanted to hide from the public. You might get surprised if you were to investigate too much into what happened here.
Number 5 on this list is the D'Souza Chaw. For those who aren't aware, because I wasn't until I looked it up, a chawl, according to Google, is a type of residential building found in Western India similar to a tenement. Typically low quality housing, chawls are generally associated with poverty. So that's a chawl, and the one in particular that we're looking at is one that's located in Mumbai. What's unique though is that it isn't the entire chawl that's haunted. It's actually just one specific spot in it, the well. Directly in the center of this building is a well. This well is lined on either side by houses of this chawl and is very enclosed. One day many years ago, a woman who lived in this building was going down to collect water from the well. As you can probably expect, it didn't go how she'd hoped and she fell inside. The fall was enough to end her life and her body was later discovered at the bottom of the well. Her body was later extracted from that well, but her spirit never left. Ever since that tragic incident, the current residents of the chawl have seen her spirit wandering the halls throughout the night. Her wails and cries can be heard all around the chawl as well, with the loudest instances happening by the well. She appears in white, and even though her white gown is clean and beautiful, her face is battered, assumingly from the tumble that she took down the well. So far she hasn't claimed any other lives like some of the other ghostly entries on this list, but her incessant crying and mere existence is enough to make anyone lose their mind. Number 4 on this list is Dumas Beach. Dumas Beach is a very pretty black sand beach that's located in Gujarat on the Arabian Sea. This place is said to be stunning in the daytime and has even been described as a look-alike to God's home. When the sun goes down though, everything changes. Dumas Beach hasn't always been a fun daytime tourist attraction. It actually used to be an ancient burial ground. It's believed that for many centuries this beach was a very important Hindu cremation site. In fact, that's why people believe some of the sand is black. The ashes of those who were cremated got mixed in with the white sand and slowly over time changed the color to what it is today. It's believed that the spirits of those who were cremated here still haunt the beach when the moon comes out. Glowing orbs have been seen floating around the sand in the dark, seemingly without a source. Laughter and the sound of conversation can be heard even though it'll be the dead of night. There have even been some disappearances at this beach before. Some tourists going out at night for a stroll and never being heard from again. A really scary account says that a man was found dead on the beach with his tongue popping out of his mouth. It was positioned in such a way that the investigators couldn't come up with a logical reason as to how he died and ended up like that. It's currently unclear why the spirits like to come out at night and not in the daytime. Some believe it's because nighttime was when the rituals would take place, but others just think that this time of day is more susceptible to paranormal activity. Whatever the case may be, if you're visiting Dumas Beach, make sure that it's always in the bright light of the sun, or else you could be in for some trouble. Number 3 on this list is Jatinga. At this point, I've read and heard hundreds, maybe even thousands of scary stories, but I've never heard of one quite as unique as what's going on in the village of Jatinga. Jatinga's a small village with less than 3,000 total people living there. Even though it doesn't have a large population of humans, it does have a large population of birds that live around the area, and that particular haunting that we'll be looking at actually concerns them. There's a phenomenon that occurs here that's been named by the locals and those studying it as the bird suicides. That's right, guys, at this one particular village, birds will actually take their own life. Apparently they fly in one direction together towards the sun and then all simultaneously plummet to the ground and die upon impact. Oftentimes this takes place on several occasions during September and October of each year. Some experts believe that this is just a coincidence and several birds have got disoriented, crashed into something, and then died, but locals think that there's a curse. Where it originated from, they're unsure of, but they believe that the village is haunted and evil spirits have caused these birds to take their own life as a means of terrorizing the villagers. I, for one, honestly can't imagine how unsettling it would be to have several birds falling from the sky regularly taking their own lives. Also, if we just step back for a second and acknowledge how actually crazy this whole phenomenon even is in the first place. A bunch of birds in this small village of 3,000 people will fall to the ground and die every year at the same time. If that isn't something out of a horror novel, then I don't know what is. Number 2 on this list are the forts of Bengar. This fort in India is one of the most haunted spots in the country and has incredible amounts of lore surrounding it. A tourist tells the legend of the fort where she writes, "The guide told us of the beautiful princess Ratnavati, who was the daughter of Shatter Singh. She was the jewel of Rajasthan. Ratnavati was much younger than her stepbrother Ajab Singh and was as universally liked as he was disliked. Tales of her beauty and delightful temperament spread far and wide, and she received many marriage proposals. A tantric priest, who was well versed in black magic, fell in love with her, but knowing that he didn't stand a chance with the beautiful princess, he tried to cast a spell on her. Seeing the princess's maid buying perfume for her in the village, he cast a spell on it so that Ratnavati would fall in love with him. Ratnavati came to know of this and threw the bottle. It turned into a boulder and hit the tantric. He was crushed under its weight, but before he died, he cursed the princess, her family, and the entire village. The next year, a battle was fought between the forces of Bengar and Ajabgar, which led to the death of Ratnavati and most of the army. This is the ancient legend that surrounds this fort, but many modern ghost stories have been told as well. Many of the locals believe that this place is the home to some devilish characters. This is due to all of the people that have gone missing at this location. It's believed that some ghostly presence is snatching people away. The purpose of these abductions are unknown though. It's also believed that due to that ancient legend, no one can build a roof here. That any new structure will break and burn to the ground from the spirits that own this place. Some apparitions have also been seen, with many people reporting that it was a lady that they saw. It's currently unclear if that's the ghost of Ratnavati or someone else who's been wronged at this location. The scariest part about this place is that you could literally never leave. To get abducted or to go missing is pretty freaking serious, and if there's some sort of entity that's doing this to people here or cursing them in some way, I'd avoid it at all costs. Number 1 on this list is Dow Hill. Dow Hill is a hill station, which, if you didn't know, is a small town that's located at a higher elevation than the nearby plain. Most places that you look up on the internet, they'll have a Wikipedia page, some other articles, a TripAdvisor, and then maybe get into the haunted stuff. Look up Dow Hill, it's all about this place being haunted. Killings, disappearances, satanic rituals, all of these have happened in Dow Hill, and they've undoubtedly left their mark on this tiny little town. Several different ghosts and hauntings currently riddle this place. One of the most popular is that of the Headless Boy. There's a road that's been nicknamed the Death Road that goes from Dow Hill to the Forest's office. This Death Road is the home to the Headless who marches along the side of it and will often appear to unsuspecting visitors. This death road heads straight to the forest's office, but things just get worse when you get there. Apparently, glowing red eyes have been spotted coming out of the forest, the sort of eyes that don't belong to any typical animal. There have also been sightings of a woman, not in white, but actually in gray rags, that wanders around the forest looking lost and destitute. This is already enough to make me not want to go, but they also have a haunted boys' school at Dow Hill. Whisperings, footsteps, doors slamming from thin air, screams, cries, laughter. This can all be heard from the apparent nothing inside of this boys' school. All of this makes Dow Hill one of the most haunted spots in India, and definitely a place that you need to keep off of your travel list.
In at number 5 we have Ross Castle. The Ross Castle is one of the most haunted places in all of Ireland. It's located on the edge of Loughleeney and Killarney National Park in County Kerry. It was built in the late 15th century by the local ruling clan, the O'Donohues, then changed ownership to the McCarthys in 1580, and finally was leased out to Sir Valentine Browne. But then in 1688 they were exiled after the Glorious Revolution. The castle then became a military barracks, which remained so until the early 19th century. The Browns never came back but did build the Kenmare House near Killarney. Legend has it that Mr. O'Donoghue jumped or was sucked out of the window of the Grand Chamber at the top of the castle and disappeared into the waters of the lake along with his horse, his table and his library. It's believed that Mr. O'Donoghue now lives in a great palace at the bottom of the lake where he keeps a close eye on his home and haunts many of the newcomers and tourists that visit the castle to this day. Another story is that in 1536, one of the owners of the castle was Richard Nugent, who was nicknamed the Black Baron, and he had a daughter named Sabina. When Sabina was on a walk along the water by her home, she encountered a man named Orwin, who was the son of an O'Reilly chieftain, who was the sworn enemy of the Black Baron. They chatted for a while and they swore to meet again. Over time they met every day in secrecy and soon fell in love, but they knew they could never be together because of the feud between their families. Sounds like Romeo and Juliet. With no hope for them in sight, they just decided to elope. One night they met again, decided to flee together, and they boarded a boat and started travelling down the lake when a storm came out of nowhere. The waves became too much for them and the boat flipped. Orwin unfortunately drowned because of this. Sabina did survive, but knowing her lover was gone, she locked herself up in the castle's tower, didn't eat or drink until she fell into a deep sleep to never wake up again and finally be with Orwin again. Sabina eventually did pass away because of this, and to this day she continues to haunt the castle. Visitors and guests make frequent encounters with her spirit, saying she is still searching for her lover so they can reunite again. And the Black Baron's presence has also been reported by visitors in and around the castle on numerous occasions. Many tourists have frequently reported waking up numerous times throughout the night, hearing sounds of doors shutting on their own and whispering noises. Few others have also said they feel an eerie presence sitting next to them while in bed. Coming in at number 4 we have Castle Leslie. Castle Leslie is a massive castle that was home to the Leslie clan, and the Castle Leslies lay on a private 1,000-acre country estate located in County Monaghan. The Leslie family has lived in the estate since 1665, when the land was purchased and given to John Leslie by King Charles II. So he moved in, and he lived in the castle with his wife Anita and family. Many tourists and guests have recalled seeing many unexplained things throughout the castle, but the Red Room in particular was the most haunted of the entire castle. It was the centre of the family life at the castle for centuries, especially because it was where Anita Leslie King gave birth to her daughter Leonie in this room. Many of the family throughout living in this castle claim to see people, hear things and feel ghostly presence in the room. Due to so many people going in and out of the Red Room, it makes sense that it's the most haunted of all rooms in the castle. It's believed that Anita had died in the room, and you can apparently see her and John both walking around the estate trying to find each other and be together again. The castle is now used as a hotel room, and each room is named after members of the Leslie family. So if you ever want to come in contact with members of the late Leslie family, many of their ghosts are seen in their specific rooms, and you can book your stay in any room in the castle, even the Red Room. Not only is it a very popular tourist spot and a hotspot for paranormal investigators, but in 2002 it gained media attention when Sir Paul McCartney married Heather Mills in the church, which is located on the estate. Also, various members of the Churchill family have visited the castle due to family ties they have with the Leslies. In at number 3 we have Clifton Castle. Clifton Castle is located in County Galway and was built in 1818 for John Darcy, who was a local landowner and the owner of the town of Clifton. He had a castle built for him and his large family while he was busy building up the town, and it's where they all stayed for the next 2 decades. In 1839, John died and his oldest son, Hyacinth, inherited the estate, but everything went downhill in 1845 when famine hit. As hunger struck, the tenants of the Darcy estate gathered on the lawn of the castle to beg and plead for work or food. However, they couldn't get anything, and many of them died of starvation on the castle grounds. After the family's death, many peasants moved to the remains of the castle for shelter, but many of the poor died here. It's believed that the family spirits can still be seen and heard on the property, and many of the peasants' ghosts are located in around the property as well. The castle has remained abandoned since around 1894, but remains a hotspot for tourists and paranormal investigators. Many believe to have seen ghost-like figures and hearing weird noises when they have been inside the castle. It's believed you can still see John Darcy roaming in and around the castle looking for food for himself and his family. The castle is also a popular attraction during the Halloween season because of the ghost sightings and paranormal activity. If you're brave enough to visit, you can do so and be joined by a tour guide to tell you everything about the castle, ghost sightings, and history of the Clifton Castle. In at number 2 we have Belvelly Castle. The Belvelly Castle is located in the County Cork, which is next to the small village of Belvelly. It was initially built by the Anglo-Norman Hodnet family, who were an ambitious family who arrived in Ireland during the 12th century. The Hodnet and de Barry families were in conflict at the time, and it resulted in the de Barrys and their allies, the Roaches, capturing the castle for themselves and renaming it Barrymore. Then later on, Sir Walter Raleigh gained ownership of the castle. During the 1800s, the castle fell into ruins after many years of being abandoned. It's believed that a faceless woman haunts the castle to this day, and it's Anglo-Norman Hodnet's wife, Margaret. The story says that she had an on and off relationship with a local lord named Clon Rockenby, who had asked for her hand in marriage on many occasions, but she refused. Clon was humiliated and decided to raise a small army to go to the castle and take Margaret by force. The Hodnets fought back against Clon and his men, and a standoff began for an entire year. When Clon finally was able to enter the castle, he was shocked to see the state of Margaret. She was starved and looked like a skeleton, basically, a shadow of her former self. Clon was enraged and smashed her favourite mirror to pieces. Margaret was known for her love of mirrors to remind her of her renowned beauty, and at the time mirrors were a status symbol with the wealthy. After seeing the mirror shatter, one of the Hodnets killed Clon with a sword. After these events, Margaret descended into insanity. She was said to have sought out mirrors constantly to check if her beauty had returned. Apparently there is one stone on the castle's wall which had been rubbed smooth over the years, said to be the spot where her favourite mirror used to hang. Because she never got her beauty back, she now haunts the castle after passing away, faceless, looking for mirrors around the castle. Many tourists and locals have seen the faceless woman in and around the castle walls. And finally, in at number 1 we have Charleville Castle. The Charleville Castle is a Gothic style castle and is located in County Offaly. It was built by Thomas More in 1641, and the estate was passed through the hands of Charles More, Lord Tullamore, who was the grandson of Thomas, and when he died in 1674 it went to Jane, then to Charles William Berry. The original mansion was extended into the beautiful castle it is today. Commissioned in 1798, was designed by Francis Johnston, was built between 1800 and 1812. The most famous of the ghost scene is that of the little girl named Lady Harriet, who died after a fall off a staircase in the castle. Another ghost scene is Lady Harriet's uncle Henry Walter, who died at the age of 7 from influenza. Although he died in London, his body was brought to Ireland and he was buried in the family vault. The volunteers describe Henry and Harriet as terrible twins, as these spirits seem to be very mischievous, and there is even a famous picture taken in the castle that shows a shadowy little boy. The library that is located in the castle is said to be a hotspot for paranormal activity. People who have visited the library have witnessed a dark shadowy form of an older person on the grounds coming from the door, so the children aren't the only ghosts located in the castle. The Charleville Castle has been claimed to be the most haunted building and grounds in all of Europe. It appeared on many TV shows like Most Haunted, Scariest Places on Earth, and Ghost Hunter International. It was also the location for many movies like Becoming Jane, Northanger Abbey, and The Green Knight. It's a huge haunted attraction and has been visited by many different psychics and paranormal investigators.
Number 5 on this list is Sismaju Hotel. Located in Bucharest, this hotel was initially built over 100 years ago in 1912 and was first called the Palace Hotel. It was called this because it truly was a marvel back then and was one of the most beautiful spots in the country. The architect who built it owned the property until 1948, when it was ultimately taken by the state. This is where it was given the name that it has today. For the next 20 years or so, the hotel thrived and wasn't only just a spot for the super wealthy to vacation, but was also a spot of parliamentary meetings and other things of great importance. In 1970 though, this hotel shut down. It was simply a side effect of the communist wave that was sweeping through this part of the world, and therefore the hotel Hotel was neglected for 20 years until finally it reopened in 1990. It wasn't used as a hotel anymore though, but rather as student housing for the students enrolled in the Academy of Film and Theatre. It was during this phase when Siskiyou Hotel saw the tragedy that haunts it to this day. Nellie Bajan was a young student who was staying here during her time in school. The semester had come to an end though, and it was Christmas time when the incident happened. She was one of the only students who didn't go home for Christmas and instead decided to stay in her dorm. One evening she was walking down the hall, and due to some of the lights being out, she stepped into the elevator shaft where there was no elevator waiting for her. She fell down several stories and landed at the bottom of the shaft, writhing in agony. She didn't die immediately though. In fact, it took her over 3 hours to finally die from her wounds. 3 hours where she was screaming and yelling for help, but nobody could hear her because they were all home for Christmas. Now her spirit haunts this place, and many students have reported hearing cries for help coming from nowhere. Some have seen her ghost standing at the end of the hallway, looking as if she's desperate for someone's attention. The sad thing about this is that if it would have happened at any other time when students were in the building, she likely would have been saved and never would have died at all. Just a horrible tragedy that's left its mark on this hotel for good. Number 4 on this list is the Witch's Pond. So this is a bit of a weird one. The Witch's Pond is a very small collection of water in the Bol du Cristeka forest that's said to be haunted. A few legends have come from this place. The first one, which I don't actually think is true, but I'm gonna tell you guys anyways, is that Vlad the Impaler was decapitated here. Now it could be possible that this did happen. The truth behind Vlad's death has been debated for centuries, but I find it unlikely that the killers would take him out to this pond in this forest and do it out here. The second legend, which I think is far more likely and probably did actually happen, is that a witch was killed here. An article on the subject writes, as the legend goes, 18th century villagers put a witch to death in the woods near a swampy pond in colonial-era cemetery of Aquia Creek. Her name, it said, was Edith, and her body was tossed into the water. This killing is how the pond got its name, the Witch's Pond. After she was killed, strange occurrences started happening here that couldn't be explained. It's said that the water turns blood red in the springtime, and sometimes people see a witch-like figure hovering over this bloody liquid. In other reports, there's a sacrificial altar that spawned here, and she's standing by it waiting to sacrifice someone. The sound of bodies being thrown into the pond along with a witch's cackle can be heard ringing throughout the forest. Locals avoid this pond, and you should too. Also, if you think about it, it's just a small pond, so I don't really know why you'd be going there anyways. Number 3 on this list is Iulia Hezdu Castle. Bogdan Hezdu was a Romanian intellectual who was very wealthy at the end of the 18th century. Bogdan, even though he put lots of effort into his work and business, put the most of his time into his daughter. Iulia Hezdu was his daughter, and in Bogdan's eyes could do no wrong. That's why when she passed very unexpectedly at the age of 19, Bogdan fell into a deep depression. While she was alive, she was rather remarkable. In her early teens, she knew 7 languages and had already graduated several prestigious schools for piano and vocals. She apparently excelled at her schooling as well and was set to have a very fruitful life if she hadn't been taken too early due to tuberculosis. Bogdan, as I mentioned, didn't respond super well to this and reacted by building the Iulia Hezdu Castle. Little did he know that it was going to be haunted. Apparently he partook in spiritism sessions with people who were trained in reaching out to the dead. In these sessions he would communicate with his daughter's ghost, and she would tell him how she wanted her castle to be constructed. This is how it was built, and everything that he decided to do and tell the architect apparently came directly from the ghost of his daughter. Her ghost didn't just leave things be when this castle was finished though. In fact, she fully took up residence here. It's said that the ghost of this girl can be spotted walking throughout the halls of this castle very often. Many people report hearing the sound of a piano playing, assumingly at the hands of this ghost. What's even creepier though is that this piano playing will instantly be followed by the applause of her dead father. Also, this castle has several rooms specifically made for spiritual rituals and also an area to worship Satan. From what I've heard, the ghost here isn't particularly dangerous in nature, but it still sounds like one of the creepier spots in the whole country. Number 2 on this list is Poenari Fortress. This fortress has been riddled with death and destruction ever since it was first built. Even though in the first part of this series we talked about Dracula's castle, this is the castle where Vlad the Impaler, the inspiration for Dracula's character, spent a large part of his time. It's said that he saw the ruins of a fortress here at the beginning of his rule and thought that it would be a great place for a stronghold. He enslaved his enemies and worked them around the clock to revive the fortress to its former glory. Many of them died due to the extensive extensive labor and fatigue, and those who didn't were killed by being impaled. Now, it's said that some of their spirits haunt this place, but they aren't the only ghost that still lingers here. The most notable haunting of this place is actually done by Vlad the Impaler's wife. During Vlad's reign, this fortress fell under siege by his enemies. Vlad was able to escape the castle, but his wife wasn't so lucky. The castle was falling, and rather than get captured by the oncoming army, she decided to fling herself off of the castle walls over top of a cliff. Her body fell far and dropped into a river many hundreds of feet below. It's said that the river ran red with blood, and it was nicknamed the Lady's River following this. Her ghost now forever wanders around this castle, restless. Some say that her soul can never find peace because she could never forgive her husband for abandoning her all those years ago. This is why locals say that she has it out for any married men that visit the castle. Although visiting this castle would definitely make for a fun day trip, it might just not be worth it. Number 1 on this list is Hoy Baciu Forest. Often referred to as the Bermuda Triangle of Transylvania, this forest is on pretty much everyone's list when it comes to the most haunted forests in the world. It all started when in 1968 a military technician took a photo of the area and captured what looked to be a UFO hovering over top of the woods. An article from My Best Place writes, after this incident, other inexplicable events soon followed, including the disappearance of a shepherd and his 200 sheep which were never found again, and the disappearance of a 5-year-old girl who later reappeared 5 years later wearing the same clothes and without having aged even one day. There have also been many first-hand reports from people who have entered the forest only to come out with burns, severe rashes, headaches, and a high fever which they didn't have before. Some studies have revealed higher than usual radioactivity produced by natural uranium present in the subsoil. The part in that article about burns and rashes and other things is one of the most common reports described by the people who go here. It seems that everyone who enters into these woods leaves with some sort of trauma. Most of that trauma is mental though. Feelings of despair and depression are widely documented from pretty much everyone who steps foot into this forest. All of the numerous reports, the photographs, and the general lore around this place has to make it the most haunted spot in all of Romania. Definitely not a forest that I recommend going to if you're looking to get outdoors.
Number 5. Old City Hall. Built in the late 1890s and once the head seat of the municipality of Toronto and County of York, this building now serves the city as its municipal courts. The city's departments were moved to the modern buildings just west of this ornate building with, rather unique architecture. What's in this old building that interests us? Oh, easy. Stories reverberate of all types of different ghostly activity. The rear staircase has a poltergeist that seems to enjoy tugging at judges' robes, as well as walking up and down the stairs where its footsteps can still be heard. The haunting was first reported by Judge S. Tupper Bigelow, who said he would hear footsteps behind him and feel something pulling at his judicial robe. Now, the same experience happened to Judge Pete Wilch. The cellars acted at one time as a holding center for prisoners, and the moans of the incarcerated have been heard as well. The northwest attic is also a spot where a presence is felt, but nobody's quite sure what it is. Courtroom 33 boasts scary encounters of the spirits of what could be the last men sentenced to hang in Canada. The last 2 men to receive the death penalty were Ronald Turpin and Arthur Lucas. Both men were hung by the, neck, and there is actually doubt about their true guilt. Salvation Army chaplain Cyril Everett tried to save both of their lives but was sadly unsuccessful. Serving the spiritual needs of the condemned, he offered both of them last rites and absolution. Upon coming home from the Don jail, his son noticed his red-stained clothing. Now this was due to a miscalculation of the drop, with Arthur's head disconnecting. Yes, minus some connective tissue. So it's said that their ghosts still haunt the property to this day. Now that room is in demand every Halloween by ghost hunters, many of whom haven't been able to stay the full night because of the weird noises and cool fogs that left them glued to the floor. So if you feel like ghost hunting, have at it. Number 4. Casa Loma. If a place has secret tunnels, then chances are there's gonna be a few ghosties roaming around, including a stern-looking old man gazing out from a window, who by the way is probably Sir Henry Pellet, the castle's original owner, a British redcoat in the stable, and a lady in white walking the halls and somebody knocking in the tunnel. Sounds like a party. You know me, I love a good lady in white. So the white lady is believed to be a maid who worked there in the early 1900s, around the time when about 60,000 people in Toronto died of influenza. She's been seen in a lot of places by guests or by cleaning and cafeteria staff as they've been cleaning up at the end of the day. Poltergeists have been reported numerous times in upper levels as well as the basement. The castle even offers ghost tours, led by Canada's Most Haunted. According to Michelle Desrochers, CMH director and Casa Loma's de facto paranormal rep, they've had stories going on in there since the 1930s when the Kiwanis Club took over the castle. There have been plenty of Casa Loma ghost stories that pop up from time to time, such as, the appearance of a man tending to the garden in the indoor conservatory, or the sound of young people's voices when no young folks are around. Now, a few stories, however, are reported time and time again by different people. A woman believed to be maybe Lady Mary has also been spotted on the grounds, although the rep has pointed out the notoriously private woman has proven elusive. At one point, the Canada's Most Haunted team attempted to film her room, leaving a camera running there while they explored other parts of the castle. When they returned to check the footage though, the tape was gone. According to mediums who have claimed to have felt the presence of Sir Henry and Lady Mary, their spirits aren't trapped there, they just choose to be there after, sadly they were ousted from Castle Loma after being unable to keep up with its costs. And obviously that place is very expensive to keep up. The tunnel leading to the castle stables are where another of its most notorious ghosts is believed to roam. Many have reported feeling as though they have been grabbed or had their hair pulled while in the tunnel. People have also reported hearing the spirit in the tunnel sighing gruffly. And he's even been captured in recordings, speaking and interacting with visitors. In one recording, he's been heard mimicking a medium who said, "Oh, he's a horrible person," while trying to make contact. Now once again we consult the paranormal rep, and she says the evidence points to the voice belonging to the ghost of a friend of Sir Henry's, who was hired to look after, his prize-winning horses. Okay, maybe it's time to check in with my friends who have worked some events at Castle Loma to see if they've met any of the ghosties. Note to self. Number 3, Mystery on the Mind Reader's Home. Well, this might not be an entry on most popular lists. I'm speaking from experience when it comes to this location. So for those who might be unaware, Mysterion is a world-renowned mind reader and has been featured on shows such as America's Got Talent, Canada's Got Talent, and he's helped fool Penn and Teller, amongst many other accolades. Don't ask me how he does what he does. I genuinely don't know and I can't tell you. But what I do know, and I know this without a doubt, is that he happens to collect a whole slew of oddities and artifacts in his home/museum. So let's start with the team stuff, his toy collection. Personally, the most interesting things in my opinion are the rare gem dolls on display, the Shirley Temple doll that's still in the box, and the whole wall of wrestling figures. Now when I was first getting into wrestling, it was fun looking at the wall and testing my knowledge, and you know what, it still is. He also has a full Pee-wee Playhouse setup, a Star Wars section, a Superman section, and plenty more that I'm sure he'll show off to me next time I visit. But I can't remember off the top of my head. But that's not the priority here. The oddities collection is. So while I tend to hold my breath whenever I visit the toy room, out of fear of accidentally making a tiny figure move, because I don't know how he gets them all in there, I'm a lot more fearful of the oddities collection. There's everything in that room. Shrunken heads, Atacama mummies, little mermaids, finger necklaces, necklaces of things I can't say on here, plenty of teeth, Victorian hair art. Hell, he used to have the Manson letters displayed on his wall. There's more taxidermy in that room than in most mainstream museums. Yeah, he has a special interest in albino taxidermy, don't ask. And proudly on display in the living room, in all their glory, are the cursed dolls that call this house a home, Leanne and Walt. Now if you're new to watching, I've actually brought Walt to the studio for a visit before, so I highly recommend watching the video I did on cursed dolls you've never heard of before. Walt is a porcelain baby doll that likes setting fires, and Leanne has a way with telekinesis. So as you can imagine, the place tends to come with its fair share of demonic activity. I've heard tales of jewelry boxes flying off of dressers, clothing items going missing, to make me never want to be in that home alone, or spend the night there. Number 2, the Cake Mansion. Once owned by the powerful Massey family, the Cake Mansion rates pretty high on the radar of Halloween thrill seekers and ghost enthusiasts. Hello. So apparently once upon a time a maid working for the Masseys was found dead above the main staircase, and it said some nights you can see her hanging from a rope above the front entrance. Apparently the maid took her life because of grief over Lillian's death, or she might have been knocked up by one of the Massey's sons and couldn't bear the shame. I'm going with the latter. Other sightings include weird happenings in the woman's washroom, a young boy playing on the staircase, and other young folks frolicking upstairs and in the kitchen. Now during the time the Massey family owned the mansion, Lillian Massey did pass away in the second floor bedroom of the house. Now her ghost is said to be roaming the woman's washroom on the same floor. Now I walked by the mansion a number of times when I used to live nearby. Heck, I've even had dinner there once. But I managed to avoid anything following me home, which thank goodness, I have enough demonic energy in my life as it is. I own a couple of demon dolls. It is what it is. Number 1, Exhibition Place. It should come as no surprise that one of Toronto's oldest collections of buildings at Exhibition Place has a few spine-tingling tales to tell. Jacqueline Edwards, senior archivist at Exhibition Place, compiled a list of the site's spookiest stories. So the General Services building at 2 Manitoba Drive is likely the most haunted building on the grounds. Staff members have heard whistling and footsteps in the hallways, crashing noises with no evidence that anything fell, and the sounds of a cocktail party taking place behind closed doors, like complete with music, drinking glasses, and then there's nobody there. Now perhaps the ghostly noises can be linked to not one, but 2 horrible deaths at the building. Built in the early 1900s, the General Services building was originally a hydroelectric power station, but now houses the Exhibition Place Operations Division, security, and yeah, the archives. In April of 1912, it was the site of a chilling killing. I like a good run. Junk dealer Joseph Rosenthal was found dead in the hydroelectric yard. The only witness to the crime was also attacked and barely survived, but managed to crawl up Strawn Avenue to find help. A hydro employee named Charles Gibson was found responsible, and the death appeared to be over a scrap metal deal that went sour. A few years later, in 1924, another man died in the basement of the building. Michael Sullivan died on Thursday, October 9th, electrocuted while trying to restore power to the city after a devastating fire. Over in the Stanley Barracks, staff members have heard knocking on doors, and then there's nobody there. Sensors often go off in the building for no reason, doors become suddenly unlocked, and items have been moved out of place. After a 13-month investigation of the X, Richard Palmisano, a paranormal activity investigator, found the barracks had the most ghostly activity, including his favorite spirit, a young girl named Jenny. Now Jenny is apparently looking for her cat. She died in an accident, her scarf got tangled, and well, you make of that what you will, but she's there and her father's looking after her. Sadly, the barracks also has some negative energy. There's two individuals that gravitate to the basement. Nasty people. One's named Bob and his buddy Dave or David, and they actually terrorize the other spirits. For historical context, the barracks was built in 1841 and originally consisted of 6 buildings, but only one remains today, the officers' quarters, which is now a part of the Hotel X, complex. Moving on, built in 1931, the Horse Palace is largely empty throughout the year, only occupied by the Toronto Police Mounted Unit and a riding academy year-round. The riding academy staff have heard phantom horses walking above their heads on the 2nd floor, and several cleaning and security staff have seen a ghostly officer riding his horse, who, tends to vanish when they take a second look. During the Second World War, the exhibition grounds was actually a military camp from 1940 to 46. The Horse Palace was used as a barracks for soldiers waiting for training and then to head over, overseas. And for many folks, this was their last memory of Toronto. So around more than 12,000 men went through the Horse Palace, and quite a few never came back. So many security officers have also mentioned that the horticulture building seems to be the worst in terms of things that go bump in the night. The ghostly activity may have something to do with the building's gruesome past. On September 18th of 1949, this building became a temporary morgue for the burned victims of the SS Neurotic. The ship was docked in Toronto when it burned, killing 118 passengers. The victims were laid out on tables throughout the building. Doctors and nurses worked, with police investigators to identify the bodies so the next of kin could claim them, but so many were badly burned and could only be identified by dental records and fingerprints. And one spooky story, a security officer on duty once responded to an alarm in the middle of the night in the basement and found a water valve had been twisted open, allowing water to freely pour into the room. But this valve could only be opened with fire department equipment, so the firefighters, turned off the valve and they were like, what the heck? Now when left alone again, the officer heard the sound of someone trying to open the door. The force being used, kind of unnerved the officer, so running towards the noise, he kicked the crash bar, forcing the door to open to find nobody on the other side. Shaken and pale, he returned to the security office, only to learn his adventure occurred on the anniversary of the ship's disaster.
Number 5. Leap Castle. There are a ton of old haunted castles in Europe, isn't there? Like, that was someone's house at some point. You gotta think, those chamber pots have been used for like 1,000 years. Ugh, yuck. And of course, some dark and nasty history has gone down there at these places as well. You can feel it almost most of the time. Leap Castle, Ireland. Built around 1250. Our first stone cold stop. This place has seen its fair share of bloodshed. Not just one ghost story, and not just a foe, but a friend. Well, family, actually. One of the most lived in castles in Ireland. It's seen some It's housed many a family, generation after generation. Apparently built by the O'Bannon family, way back. Legend has it, 2 brothers dared each other to jump off a cliff for house rights. Yeah, more of a myth, I think. Then comes the O'Carroll family. Now we get into some actual literature. Father dies, powerful family, no successor to take the castle. However, this turned into yet another brother versus brother kinda duel. Couple stabbings around the castle's chapel, and enter stage left, lots of ghosts. Ruthless, right? The smell of burning and decay now apparently. The spirit of the murdered priest now lurks the stairwell, isn't often reported by staff as a slain brother. What's with the brothers thing? Among the ghostly figures is also Emily and Charlotte, the ghosts of 2 girls playing in the main hall circa 1600s era. The most famous afterlife resident, the Red Lady. There have been sightings of this creature for centuries. She roams in a long red dress, tall and lean. The Red Lady carries a huge dagger as well, with her hand raised. Can you imagine? Stone cold castle, middle of the night. Just scrolling through Instagram after a nice Airbnb night, and you look up to a red ghost lady holding a knife at you. Yeah, I would just like cartoon run on air, Number 4, Karamakos. As always, if you like what we do here on Top 5 Scary, throw us a thumbs up down below, or leave us a comment to ponder over. Halloween's just next week. Which haunted house does it for you? Churches do it for me, churches. I don't do creepy, creaky churches, So many floorboards. Okay, so this planet is like old. We're finding things and sites that are literally changing history textbooks as we speak. Göbekli Tepe, Petra, like Syria and Turkey, these places are old, but Greece is like ancient old. Newsweek reported that in 2020, a collection of more than 30 inscribed tablets were found at the bottom of a 3,000-year-old Athenian well in the ancient cemetery of Karamakos. Yeah, scary enough, right? You see, these tablets bear individual curses and prayers to the Greek gods of the underworld. So all sorts of nasty energy just floating atop there. Juta Strazek, who led the excavation, said that whoever ordered the curses inscribed on the tablets was unnamed, but the black magic seen, heard, and felt at the site is present there for all to research. Even though back then black magic and the use of curses was forbidden in Greece during that time, which makes this even more horrifying. Just refound in 2016, the cemetery itself was first excavated in 1870 from the Greek ministry. Progress halted during World War II, and the excavation then lost momentum. The excavation site consists of a massive sanctuary holding thousands of precious artifacts. Keramikos comes from the Greek word for pottery or ceramics, arguably the most important cemetery of ancient Athens, riddled with the oldest tombs and curses that went along with them. There's always like adultery feuds too, isn't there? I curse thee, Demetria, for looking at my Adonis. Like lots of jealousy and lying back then, it seems. Number 3, Kaimuki House. This Halloween, if you're trick-or-treating, listen to old Uncle Kyle and do not go near this house. Located in the Kaimuki neighborhood of Honolulu, Hawaii, this place has a horrifying reputation. Apparently, murder and a most foul nature has occurred in the house, many times. Murder case after disappearance, the local stories became fiction. It's now known by locals as the most haunted place on the island. And here's why. The house itself looks like a normal, surf-friendly home. Yeah, not really. Enter stage right, the Kasha. The Kasha is a creature said to reside in the actual house. It's a man-eating ghost from Japanese folklore. Not just story, the events from the Kaimuki house have been documented. Well documented. Interpretations of the monster includes a ghoul who lives and feeds on the dead, a cat-like demon from the sky who steals away bodies. However, all 3 versions have one thing in common. Its hunger for corpses. Ooh. In 1942, police officers were called to the house by a woman who apparently kept repeating, "She's trying to get my children." Upon entering the house, the officers could do nothing but apparently watch in horror as the members of the family were all levitating and ragdolled and hurled across the room by an unknown force. The police were baffled and decided to just load everybody up in the car and leave the premises. The original Kaimuki house was torn down during the summer of 2016 and has since yet been under investigation and new construction. Okay. So no vacation in Hawaii this summer. Noted. Number 2, Ancient Ram Inn. Of course we needed an ancient old haunted inn, didn't we? Isn't this the start of like every great horror movie? The lights flicker in an old haunted inn in the middle of nowhere. The bell dings but no one answers. Should have been a writer. Well, luckily this is also a functioning pub, and it's located in Watton-under-Edge, a market town within the district of Gloucestershire, England. Look at this place. It's like bending and molding to the earth, like a fence that's grown around a tree. This thing is old. The inn has been owned and operated by many people, going back as far as 1,000 years, since like 1145. Hope they clean their beer taps. This inn was said to have been owned by the St. Mary's Church when first built. And of course, with that, it's haunted. The Ancient Ram Inn has been investigated by years of paranormal researchers. Television shows like Ghost Adventures and Most Haunted. The inn was investigated by UK paranormal study group, the Ghost Club, which is apparently the oldest paranormal research organization in the world. It's haunted. But what makes something haunted? Is it the age or the sinister events that happened in and around the premises? This land sits on the intersection of 2 lines that people think contain high spiritual energy. Using a map, of course, these lines trace directly to England's most sacred site, Stonehenge. Legend has it that the energy from Stonehenge feeds the property's paranormal power. Not to mention, the backyard is home to a 5,000-year-old pagan burial ground. Witches being burned at the stake on the property. Hey, if you see a pagan ghoul pouring himself a Guinness in the middle of the night, just say cheers and keep walking. Number 1, Bran Castle. It's October, so we're feeling extra spooky around here at Top 5 Scary. We're familiar with the classics, right? If we're not, go and binge some horror movie marathons, people. The castle of all castles, Dracula. Well, kinda. What Dracula was based off of. Where he lived, at least. Also, the national monument of Romania itself. Fun fact. It doesn't get much more Halloween-y than this place, come on. Bran Castle is linked to the historical figure who inspired author Bram Stoker's creation of this half-bat, half-man. No, not Batman. Vlad III, Dracula, otherwise known as Vlad the Impaler. Don't panic, this was like a couple years back, like mid-1400s. We know this guy, and yes, you heard it right, the Impaler. I don't really need to get into much detail with this one. To impale. Google it. Some believe Bran Castle was one of the sites which Vlad reigned. Unfortunately, history says that he wasn't around here. In fact, it says that he was only imprisoned here for a little bit. Yeah, although there's no coffins inside. So what makes this place so scary? Apparently during Stoker's research to the region of Transylvania, he came across accounts of the atrocities committed by Vlad and used the Dracula name after studying him. And of course, this castle, built out of wood originally, somewhere around the 11th, 12th century, seems to be pretty fitting upon research of the old haunted castles territory. Unfortunately, this 1,000-year-old home isn't really a home anymore, just home to relics now, and the occasional cold breeze and fuzzy camera picture. Bran Castle acts as a museum now and a popular Halloween destination. Apparently they found a gold casket that houses the heart of Romania's Queen Mary in the walls. Yeah, that's pretty haunted castle material, no?
In 5th place, we have Pendle Hill, also known as Penhull. Pendle Hill is located in the Lancashire countryside, near the villages of Burnley, Colne, Paddingham, Clitheroe, and Nelson. Pendle Hill is famous for George Fox's Visitation, the Quaker movement leader in 1652, and the barometer experiments of Richard Towneley in 1661. I feel like I'm missing something else they were famous for. Let's see if I can get the gray matter in here working. Oh, right. It's home to a very famous witch trial. Locals to the area know very well the story of the 10 women executed for witchcraft at Pendle Hill in the 17th century, who, still haunt the area. The story of the Pendle Witches is an excellent example of a well-documented allegation of witchcraft. So this tale begins way back in the year 1612, when there was said to be a family of local peasants who lived in a vast limestone tower. However, the family was no ordinary family. These peasants had enormous powers and were reported to be in league with the devil. According to reports, the family made clay effigies out of teeth and human hair. In a coincidence that's going to surprise absolutely no one, local people died of various mysterious illnesses or great pains at the time. The milk in the area turned sour and cattle died mysteriously as well. People were kind of afraid to go up that hill. A local magistrate, Roger Norwell, made the decision to arrest 2 people living in the tower. They were brought to Lancaster for trial, and 2 days later, the rest of the witches were arrested and also taken to Lancaster for trial. Out of the 12 folks on trial, 1 passed during the proceedings, another one was found not guilty, and the other 10 were, very much found guilty. On August 20th of 1612, all 10 accused witches went to the way of the rope necklace at Gallows Hill. The history of the witch trials has given the place an eerie atmosphere and several terrifying reports. Pendle Hill was featured on the show Most Haunted, during which several supernatural events are said to have taken place, including members of the show's crew being injured. Most of the ghostly activity is said to be out of spite from the witches, who continue to call Pendle Hill their cursed home. One tale of haunting in particular took place during a Ouija board experiment. Is my disdain showing yet? The stupidity was happening in the foundations of Malkin Tower, when a tooth suddenly landed on the center of the table. Now this caused everyone present to be extremely concerned, and after having obviously checked to ensure that nobody in the group had lost a tooth, which was, definitely human, they left the folks involved in a quandary as to how it got there. The tooth was eventually identified as belonging to an adult of around 40 years of age, and was in fact an old tooth. And if, a league of ticked-off witches wasn't enough ghosties for y'all, a Bronze Age burial site has been discovered at the hill's summit. Just a little bonus. In 4th place, we have Stirling, Scotland. This beautiful market town has played a pivotal role in the history of Scotland, along with playing host to multiple grisly stories and, unsettled spirits. The imposing hilltop, Stirling Castle, is home to several ghosts, and I'm struggling to decide who to talk about in detail. Probably one of the mysterious ladies. Oh, I know, the Green Lady. It is believed that she was a servant girl in the employ of Mary, Queen of Scots, and a very gifted one at that, who was blessed with the powers of foretelling, or second sight. So this maiden had a premonition that if her queen slept even one night within the ancient fortress, she would not live to see dawn. So she told her mistress of the fears, and thankfully, Mary listened and offered to allow the girl to watch over her as she slept, and, call for aid should any threat present itself. Through the long, dark night, our servant gal sat, bundled in a great soft chair guarding her beloved queen. Weary from a long journey, Mary fell into a deep slumber as soon as her head hit the pillow. And this girl too was kind of weary. She barred the door and, lighting a taper, sat by the bedside. There she sat for what seemed like an eternity, near hypnotized by the flickering of the taper's end. But, try as she might, she could not resist the weariness in her bones. Her limbs grew heavy, her eyelids heavier still, and decided, that maybe closing her eyes for a minute wouldn't hurt since she was so exhausted. Hey, we've all been there. But what seemed like no more than a few moments, she opened them again, blinking against the sudden brightness of the chamber. She, through bleary eyes, tried to call out, but found her throat so dry and realized that the tiny taper, set so carefully by the queen's cot, had fallen, lighting the bedclothes and tapestries on fire. Coughing, she darted from her chair, gathering the deeply sleeping queen in her arms, and carried her towards the door, barely managing to get her to safety before eventually passing from smoke inhalation. Sadly, her name has been forgotten. She is known only by the color of the gown she wore, the Green Lady. So visitors to Stirling should be mindful that their female phantoms have one thing in common. Yep, I said phantoms. plural. It is said that whosoever looks even once into their eyes won't make it through the night. So if you notice like a ruffled robe or a well-turned spectral heel as you're passing around, turn away, avert your gaze, because you don't want to risk your soul. Some say that Queen Mary herself haunts the castle, roaming the grounds in a pink dress. The Darnley Coffee House on Bow Street is also said to be haunted by a mischievous poltergeist, while the Old Town Jail is home to the spirit of the last man that went the way of the rope necklace on site. In third place, we have Edinburgh, Scotland. So the beautiful city of Edinburgh is well known for its ghostly activity. For starters, the South Bridge vaults are haunted by several different ghosts. During the Irish potato famine of 1845 to 47, thousands of Irish folks immigrated to Scotland seeking, survival. Forced into the vaults under the bridge, as many as 10 people lived in a single room. The conditions were poorer than the tenants, crowded and damp with barely any air circulation. And just like that, the area quickly became Edinburgh's red light district. Services of the night, please tell me you get what I'm referencing, gambling, and a thriving black market were commonplace in the vaults. By the late 19th century, the vaults were closed off for good in an effort to drive the seedy activity out from under Edinburgh's main thoroughfare. For decades, these vaults sat empty as their icky past slipped into obscurity. Obscurity that ended in 1998 when a local man crawled through a narrow passageway in one of his buildings and rediscovered the rooms underneath the bridge. Since then, the cavernous vaults of Southbridge have been open to the public, and the reports of ghosts have poured in. Honestly, what have I said about leaving hidden spaces that are blocked off be? Nothing good comes from opening them. Witnesses have claimed to feel cold gusts of air, hear voices, and to see and sense an intangible presence. Some ghosts are quite bold, like the spectral youngling Jack, who likes to grab visitors' hands in the wine vault. Just for funsies. While another more menacing presence is known as Mr. Boots. He's an unkept man that was named for his, tall footwear. He lurks in the back section of the vault and has been known to push and throw rocks at visitors. Some have claimed to hear his footsteps on the cobbles and his echoing voice cursing throughout the chambers. It's even rumored that in the 1820s, the infamous serial killers William Burke and William Hare lurked within the vault, killing some of their 17 victims there, and storing the bodies in that same location until they were sold off for medical dissections. Visitors to Edinburgh Castle also frequently report sightings of apparitions. A young piper who disappeared without a trace hundreds of years ago can still be heard today, with the faint, haunting sound of a lost soul. As well as the story of the vanished piper, the dungeons are frequented by a headless drummer boy and a gaggle of French prisoners captured during the 7-Year War, who are regularly sighted in and around the castle. If you hear the bark of a dog in Edinburgh's Old Town, yet there's nothing there, it could be Bobby, a phantom Skye Terrier that is known to all in the city. The faithful hound spent 14 years guarding his master's grave until he finally passed away in 1872 and was buried in Greyfriars Kirkland, near his owner. People still hear his little bark near his grave. A small statue of Greyfriars Bobby is a popular landmark on the corner of Candlemaker Row, and it's good luck to rub Bobby's nose. Aw, here I am tempted to plan a trip, mainly to give a good ghost doggy a pet. Oh, almost forgot. Greyfriars is a graveyard that dates back to the 16th century and is the resting place of several infamous characters, but the most gruesome story is that of Bloody Mackenzie. Look, the interwebs really don't like when I say that word, so bear with me here. This wealthy lord was tasked with punishing hundreds of prisoners who refused to change their religion. Locals believe that the ghost of Mackenzie haunts the graveyard after his tomb was disturbed by a homeless man who broke into the graveyard at night. As soon as he laid hands on the tomb, the floor opened up beneath him and he dropped into a shallow grave containing plague victims. Since then, many other freaky episodes have taken place nearby. A woman was found unconscious with bruises around her neck, and many claim that it was Mackenzie's poltergeist, continuing his evil deeds in death as he did in life. No biggie. In second place, we have Canterbury, Kent. While this medieval city might be aesthetically stunning, it has quite the dark past. The ghosties here tend to be a little more spread out than other places, and have different tales, so let's have fun with some short and sweet descriptions. For starters, Canterbury Cathedral, a pilgrimage site for centuries, is the home to many restless spirits. Archbishop of Canterbury was famously and brutally killed by the King's Knights in 1170. Beckett's place of death has a large welded cross above it with 2 swords. His tomb can be found near the high altar, where his apparition still appears to visitors. Other cathedral ghosts include a nun and the ghost of Simon of Sudbury, who was the Archbishop of Canterbury from around 1375. Other paranormal hotspots in Canterbury include Tiny Tim's Tea Room, haunted by the spirits of 3 younglings whose remains were found within the walls during restoration. And hey, if you hang around Hawks Road, you might glimpse Abigail, a sad soul who frequents the area. Another spooky house in the area is the Bishop's Finger, which is located on St. Dunstan Street. In the 19th century, a housekeeper by the name of Ellen Bleen discovered that her employer, a priest, was having an affair with a younger woman. It is said that Ellen poisoned the pair with a meat pie and then vanished from the city. Shortly afterwards, it was discovered that she had been buried alive as her body was found nearby. Ellen is said to wander the streets and manifest herself in the Bishop's Finger every Friday. She's described as, plain-faced, larger lady in a long white skirt and a mob cap. There are more haunted places in Canterbury, but sadly I don't have all the time I would like to go into more detail. In first place, we have the village of Pluckley. Included in the Guinness Book of Records as the most haunted place in Britain, the Kentish village of Pluckley's popularity amongst ghosts and ghouls had to make it the #1 spot on our list today. Wandering monks, decapitated highwaymen, and all manner of central casting spirits reside here, but special attention should be paid to the particularly gruesome story of the Pluckley Watercress Lady. Seen smoking a clay pipe and living on the banks of the river about a century ago, the woman would sell watercress to the locals and drink gin from a flask. My kind of lady. Falling asleep one evening, it is believed that her pipe scattered ashes onto her rags and she burned to death. So nowadays, a pink glowing specter can allegedly be spotted at the exact location where she went up in flames. Now, before someone asks why this place is scarier than the others on today's list, other ghosties who frequent in the town include the specter of the highwaymen who hide in a tree at Pinnock, a phantom coach and horses who pop up in several areas around the village, the ghost of a Romani woman who drowned in a stream, a miller who has been seen at Mill Hill, the hanging body of a schoolmaster in Dicky Bus's Lane, a colonel who hanged himself in Park Wood, a man smothered by a wall of clay who drowned at the brickworks, the Lady of Rose Court who is said to have poisoned herself in despair over a love triangle, the White Lady, a young woman who is apparently buried inside 7 coffins and an oak sarcophagus who haunts St. Nicholas's Church, but not to be confused with the Red Lady, reputably a member of the family who haunts the churchyard of St. Nicholas's Church. Oh, and a small white dog has also been reported in the same location. Now, I don't know about y'all watching, but that's a few more ghosties than I'd like to see in a smaller town. And the fact that they like to roam and not stay in one spot? Hard pass.
Coming in at 5, the Sultan's Palace. At 716 Dauphine Street in the French quarter of New Orleans stands a 4-story home housing one of the most unusual yet terrifying ghosts, the Sultan. Built in 1836 by Jean-Baptiste Laprette, a plantation owner who rented out his city home when he was experiencing a shortage of cash. However, the man he rented it out to was a little odd. His name was Prince Suleiman, a Turk who claimed to be the Sultan of a Mid-Eastern country. He had many wives and family members as well as slaves and servants. Now things started to get a little weird when folks began reporting that not only did the Sultan's harem consist of many women but also young boys, with stories of orgies and kidnappings quickly surfacing. However, things took a truly gruesome turn when a passing neighbor made an early morning discovery. They noticed the house was particularly quiet and saw blood dripping from the gallery oozing out of the front door. He contacted the police and what they found would haunt them forever. Body parts were strewn all over the house, which was also covered in blood. Women, children and guards were slaughtered and beheaded. However, there was one body that had been left untouched. The Sultan. He had been buried alive with one hand reaching up through the dirt, almost as if he was trying to claw his way out. The identity of the murderer still remains a mystery to this day, and as of today, his angry spirit is said to roam the home, creating unusual noises, playing loud music, as well as making unwelcome advances on passing female residents. Coming in at 4, the Queen Mary, Long Beach, California. The RMS Queen Mary is a retired British ocean liner that sailed the North Atlantic Ocean between 1936 and 1967 for the Cunard White Star Line. She was built by John Brown and Company in Scotland along with RMS Queen Elizabeth, with the ships being built as a planned 2-ship weekly express service between Southampton and New York. However, with the outbreak of the Second World War, Queen Mary was converted into a troop ship and ferried Allied soldiers during the war. Following that, she was refitted as a passenger service before retiring completely in 1967, during which time she sailed from Southampton to the port of Long Beach, California, where she remains permanently moored. However, since that day, claims have been made that the ship is haunted, with Time magazine including it among its top 10 haunted places. According to some reports, one of the staterooms is alleged to be haunted by the spirit of a person murdered there, supposedly anyway. The Queen Mary also explicitly promotes suite room B340, which was a former third-class cabin as, I quote, notoriously haunted. Many ghost tours take place in the ship, including Dark Harbour, which operates during Halloween. As it stands, up to 50 deaths have been logged on the Queen Mary, which truly makes her one of the most haunted ships in history. Coming in at 3, Eastern State Penitentiary, Philadelphia. Also known as ESP, this is a former American prison located in Pennsylvania and was operational from 1829 to 1971. America's most notorious criminals lived in these walls, including Al Capone and bank robber Willie Sutton. Initially designed by John Haviland, Eastern State is considered to be the world's first true penitentiary and was renowned for its revolutionary system of incarceration, also known as the Pennsylvania system, or separate system, which encouraged separate confinement for inmates as a form of rehabilitation. Inmates were housed in cells that could only be accessed by a small door that led to an equally as small exercise yard attached to the back of the prison. Rumor has it the doors were small so prisoners would have a harder time attempting to get out, thus minimizing the chances of a guard getting attacked. While others have suggested the small doors forced prisoners to bow while entering or exiting their cells, which is related to penance and ties in with the religious inspiration of the prison. When an inmate would leave the cell, his head would be covered with a hood, so he couldn't see or be seen by others. However, by 1913, the penitentiary was forced to abandon its solitary system due to overcrowding, before closing its doors entirely in 1970. As of today, the penitentiary welcomes thousands of visitors yearly for both its museum and ghost tours, with some folks reporting paranormal happenings including disembodied laughter, shadowy figures, and pacing footsteps. Coming in at 2, St. Augustine Lighthouse, Florida. This lighthouse is a private aid to navigation and an active working lighthouse in Florida, and was built between 1871 and 1874. As it stands, nearly 225,000 people visit the lighthouse annually, due to its reputation for otherworldly visitors. The lighthouse has had many tragedies over the years, with one of its many ghosts rumored to be that of a lighthouse keeper who fell to his death while painting the tower. Not only that, but 3 young girls also drowned when their cart they were playing on broke and fell into the ocean, with some visitors claiming to hear the sounds of children playing in and around the lighthouse. This haunted location has been featured in episodes of the sci-fi series Ghost Hunters, as well as My Ghost Story. However, researcher Joe Nickel, who investigated the lighthouse, has stated that there is no credible evidence the place is haunted, and instead noted that the spooky noises are just seagulls or even the wind. Party pooper. And finally, coming in at number 1, Lep Castle Island. Lep Castle, yep, it's pronounced Lep, is a castle located in Calgary County, Offaly Island. Now, there are varied accounts of when the castle came to be, with most sources pointing to the 13th century or even as late as the 15th century. Now, it was originally built by the O'Bannon clan before ruling was taken over by the O'Carroll clan. However, all was not well within the castle. Legend has it that during a struggle for power within the clan during the 1530s, one member plunged a sword into his brother, a priest, while he was holding mass in the castle chapel. The butchered priest fell across the altar and passed away in front of his family. The room is now formally known as the Bloody Chapel, with many witnesses claiming to have spotted the priest haunting the area at night. However, that's not all. The castle's history is incredibly macabre. During renovations in the early 1900s, a few workmen stumbled across a secret dungeon in the Bloody Chapel that was housing human skeletons that filled 3 cartloads when hauled away. The dungeon was designed in a way that prisoners would fall through a trapdoor and instantly have their lungs punctured by wooden spikes at the bottom, ultimately dying a slow and painful death. Many tourists have also spoken of a red lady who is reported to walk the halls at night holding a dagger. The castle has become notorious around the globe, with media flocking to capture its paranormal offerings, including ABC Family's Scariest Places on Earth and Living TV's Most Haunted. Coming in at number 5, Hill of Crosses in Lithuania. Located in Lithuania, the Hill of Crosses is a site of pilgrimage about 12 kilometers north of the city of Shaolin. Now, the precise origin of the crosses is unknown, but it is believed that the first crosses were placed on the former Diamante Hill fort after the 1831 uprising. The uprising was of course known as the Polish-Russian War and was an armed rebellion in the heartland of partitioned Poland against the Russian Empire. Ever since then, not only crosses and crucifixes but also statues of the Virgin Mary have appeared on the Hill of Crosses, as well as carvings of Lithuanian patriots, and thousands upon thousands of tiny effigies and rosaries have been brought here by Catholic pilgrims. Now, as you would expect, the exact number of all these items is unknown, but it is estimated estimated to range between 50,000 to 100,000. Over the years, the place has come to signify the peaceful endurance of Lithuanian Catholicism despite the threats it faced throughout history. Throughout history, the Hill of Crosses has been used as a place for Lithuanians to pray for peace for their country and for the loved ones they had lost during the wars of independence. The hill eventually became a place of defiance once again during Soviet occupation from 1944 to 1991. The hill and crosses were bulldozed by Soviets 3 times, but locals kept rebuilding it. So sweet. In at number 4, Myrtles Plantation, USA. The Myrtles Plantation is a historic home and former antebellum plantation in St. Francisville, Louisiana. Built in 1976, it is considered to be one of America's most haunted homes, with a variety of legends surrounding the plantation. Now, one of the reasons Myrtles is believed to be so damn haunted is because it is rumored to be on top of an ancient Tunica Indian burial ground. As of right now, it is currently a bed and breakfast and offers historical and mystery tours. As I previously mentioned though, it is considered to be one of the most haunted homes in the United States, with it rumored to be home to at least 12 ghosts, and is often reported that 10 murders occurred in the house, but historical records only indicate the murder of 1, William Winter. William Drew Winter is also a very popular character in the plantation. He was an attorney who lived in the home before being shot by a stranger. It has been said that after he was shot, he staggered inside the home and died trying to climb the stairs. He died on the 17th step. Even today, visitors still claim to hear his dying footsteps. Coming in at number 3, Battleship Island, Nagasaki, Japan. Also known as Hashima Island, this is the abandoned island nearby the city of Nagasaki in southern Japan, and is one of 505 uninhabited islands in Nagasaki Prefecture. In the 1950s, it was a bustling place home to thousands of coal mine workers and families. However, ever since the coal mine shut down in 1974, it has remained abandoned. As petroleum replaced coal in Japan in the 1960s, coal mines began to close across the country, with Mitsubishi officially closing the mine in January 1974, and the island was completely cleared by April of the same year. Today, its most notable features are the abandoned and still mostly intact apartment buildings, the surrounding sea walls, and its distinctive profile shape. In 2009, Japan requested to include Hashima Island along with 22 other industrial sites in the UNESCO World Heritage Site list, which was initially opposed by South Korean authorities on the grounds that Korean and Chinese forced laborers were used on the island prior and during World War II. Although Hashima was entirely closed off until 2009, travelers are now allowed to visit, with it being recognized by UNESCO in 2015. You may also recognize the site from the big screen, with it serving as the secret headquarters of Bond villain Raoul Silva in the 2012 movie Skyfall. In at 2, Lizzie Borden's house, Fall River, Massachusetts. Now, for those who don't know, the Lizzie Borden house is where Lizzie Borden and her family lived, and is located on 230 2nd Street in the city of Fall River, Massachusetts. Born Lizzie Andrew Borden, sucks for her, she was an American woman who was the main suspect in the August 4th, 1892 axe murders of her father and stepmother. However, Borden was tried and ultimately acquitted of the murders. The case received widespread newspaper coverage throughout the United States, and following her release from jail, where she was held during the trial, Borden chose to remain in the house her parents had been killed in, despite being ostracized by her other residents. Now, because the Commonwealth of Massachusetts elected to not charge anyone with the murder that occurred over 127 years ago, a ton of speculation about the crimes have continued on. Now, Lizzie spent the rest of her life in the home up until her death at age 66, just days before the death of her sister Emma. The house has been operated as a bed and breakfast since 1996 under the ownership of Martha McGinn, who inherited the home. According to Martha McGinn, the room where Lizzie's stepmother Abby Borden was found murdered is the most requested room at the bed and breakfast. Guests who stay, not just in Abby's room but in the home as a whole, have reported all manners of strange sightings in the home. Would you dare stay there? I would. I'd stay in every room. And finally coming in at number 1, Chernobyl, Pripyat, Ukraine. Pripyat is a ghost city in northern Ukraine named after the nearby Pripyat River and was founded on February 4th, 1970 as the 9th nuclear city in the Soviet Union to serve the nearby Chernobyl nuclear power plant. The city was officially proclaimed in 1979 and had grown to a population of 49,360 by the time it was evacuated on April 27th, 1986, the day after the Chernobyl disaster. Now, the Chernobyl disaster was a nuclear disaster which occurred on April 26, 1986 at the nuclear power plant not far from Pripyat, and was considered to be the worst nuclear disaster in history, and is also one of the only 2 nuclear energy disasters rated at 7, the maximum severity on the International Nuclear Event Scale, the other being the 2011 Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster in Japan. Ever since the nuclear disaster in Pripyat, the city has remained entirely uninhabited since the evacuation, although the buildings, furniture and all other signs of life are exactly where the former citizens left them. It is a city frozen in time, plates still out, dolls left on beds, and even a haunting fairground ride waiting to be used. Weathered books can be found in classrooms and abandoned photographs are still hanging on walls in their original frames. There are strict rules regarding the site considering the sheer amount of radiation in the area. However, following the airing of HBO's Chernobyl series, Ukraine's government have announced that the site will become an official tourist attraction. Will you be checking it out? I personally don't want to die, so I won't. In at number 5, the Sally House, Atchison, Kansas. Built in the mid-1800s in Atchison, Kansas, the Sally House is believed to be haunted by a little girl named Sally, who died in the home during an appendicitis surgery. However, it was in the mid-1990s that Sally's story began to receive both local and national attention, when the owners at the time, Tony and Deborah Pickman, began noticing strange occurrences in the home, including attacks on Tony, unexplained voices, and burnt finger marks. After investigations were conducted by the Kansas Paranormal Group, it was discovered that Sally wasn't the only ghost haunting the house, but there was also a middle-aged woman. However, one paranormal believer has an explanation for the second ghost. They believe that this is in fact Sally's mother, who died not long after Sally passed away. She had attacked the doctor and died, with the spirits remaining in the home. The mother is said to still be grieving the loss of her child, and is the one who is said to attack visitors. However, Sally is said to be a happy ghost and tries to play with children that move in the house. Other paranormal experiences in the house include pictures being turned upside down, floating objects, disembodied voices, apparitions, toys being thrown around, and doors opening, closing, locking and unlocking. The house is now standing vacant with nobody wanting to live in the home. However, the house offers self-guided tours in September and October, as well as guided day tours and special overnight visits. In at number 4, the Myrtles Plantation, St. Francisville, Louisiana. The Myrtles Plantation is a historic home and former antebellum plantation in St. Francisville, Louisiana. Built back in 1796 by General David Bradford, the plantation is reported to be one of America's most haunted homes. The plantation house is rumored to be on top of an ancient Indian burial ground, with it currently being a bed and breakfast and offering historical and mystery tours for ghost hunters. The plantation is said to be home to at least 12 different ghosts, with it often being reported that 10 murders occurred in the home. However, historical records only indicate the murder of William Winter. William Drew Winter was an attorney who lived in the plantation from 1865 until 1871, until he was shot by a stranger. After being shot, it is said that he staggered inside the house and died trying to climb the stairs. He died on the 17th step, and to this day, visitors as well as employees still hear his dying footsteps. Jumping ahead to 2002, Unsolved Mysteries filmed a segment at the plantation, and according to host Robert Stack, the production crew experienced technical difficulties during the production. It was also featured on the TV series Ghost Adventures, as well as on the series Most Terrifying Places in America. In at number 3, House of Death, New York. On 14th West 10th Street in Greenwich Village in New York stands a picturesque home, which is now known as the House of Death, with it having a less than cute history. Since its construction back in the 1850s near the start of the Civil War, 22 people have reported to have died in the home, and according to the New York Post, some of their spirits have never left. Some residents over the years have reported sightings of Samuel Clemens, aka Mark Twain, who lived in the building between 1900 and 1901. Sightings of the author have been reported on the first floor of the home near the staircase, with him said to be wearing a white suit. Allegedly, the spirit stated, "My name is Clemens and I has a problem here, I gotta settle." A few years later, after the sighting, the house was converted into a 10-unit apartment building. However, the hauntings did not cease. According to the New York Post, actress Jan Bryant Bartell and her husband moved into the apartment on the top floor in 1957 and immediately felt a monstrous moving shadow that loomed up behind her. After she left the home, she published a memoir where she wrote about feeling a brush against the back of her neck and smelling a rotting odor throughout the apartment. She went on to state that on one particular occasion she saw a vision of a man and she reached out to him. She stated that she touched a substance without substance, chilly damp, diaphanous as March mist or a cloud of ether. Coming in at number 2, Lalaurie Mansion, New Orleans, Louisiana. Located on 1140 Royal Street in New Orleans is the Lalaurie Mansion, a home which was reported to be one of the most haunted places in the world. Some may also be familiar with this house as it was depicted on American Horror Story Coven. Now, this home is where slaves were tortured at the hands of Delphine Lalaurie. Born Marie Delphine McCarty, but more commonly known as Madame Lalaurie, she was a New Orleans socialite and serial killer who, like I said, tortured and murdered slaves in her home. Accounts of Lalaurie's treatments of slaves between the years of 1831 to 1834 are mixed. However, Harriet Martineau, writing in 1838, claimed that enslaved people kept by Lalaurie were observed to be singularly haggard and wretched. However, in public appearances, Lalaurie was seen to be generally polite to them. Now, everything changed when a fire broke out in the home on April 10, 1834, which began in the kitchen. When the police were called and the fire marshals arrived, they found the cook chained to the stove by her ankle, with her later stating that she had started the fire as an attempt to end her life. As reported in the New Orleans Bee of April 11, 1834, bystanders responding to the fire attempted to enter the quarters of the enslaved people to ensure that everyone had been evacuated. Upon being refused the keys by the Lalauries, the bystanders broke down the doors to the quarters and found, I quote, 7 slaves, more or less horribly mutilated, suspended by their neck with their limbs apparently stretched. When the discovery was made and the news broke out, a mob of local citizens attacked the Lalauries' residence and demolished and destroyed everything upon which they could lay their hands. Now, the original mansion occupied by Lalaurie did not survive, with the mansion on the corner of Royal Street, which is commonly referred to as the Lalaurie Mansion, not being the same building inhabited by Lalaurie. Despite that, many believe that the ground itself is still haunted. And finally, coming in at number 1, Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast, Massachusetts. First and foremost, Lizzie Borden was an American woman who was the primary suspect in the 1892 axe murders which took place at the home in Fall River, Massachusetts. The victims were Lizzie's father and her stepmother, with her being ultimately acquitted of the murders. Now, this case received a huge amount of attention across the United States, and following her release from jail where she had been held during the trial, Lizzie opted to remain in the same area where the deaths occurred, despite facing ostracism from other residents. Lizzie ultimately spent the remainder of her life in Fall River before passing away of pneumonia at the age of 66. The Lizzie Borden house is of course the home where the Borden family lived, with it being located on 230 2nd Street in the city of Fall River. From 1874 to 1892, the house was the property of Andrew Borden, Lizzie's father, who was a member of Fall River High Society. After Lizzie's trial and ultimate acquittal, she bought another home located on 7 French Street that she named Maplecroft. This is where she remained until her death. Now, as of today, the Borden house operates as a bed and breakfast, and it has been doing so since 1996. It is currently owned by Martha McGinn, whose grandparents purchased the home back in 1948. According to Martha, the room where Lizzie's stepmother was found murdered is the most requested room of the bedrooms at the B&B, which is incredibly sick and twisted.